Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast, and I ask that anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. Is there anyone here wishing to record? Seeing none, I'd ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, could you please conduct the roll call?
President Kushmarek?
Present.
Councilor Boschman?
Here.
Councilor Couture?
Here.
Councilor Di Natale?
Here.
Councilor Fleming?
Here.
Councilor Green?
Here.
Councilor Schultz?
Here.
Councilor Squalia?
Present.
Councilor Van Hazinga?
Present.
Councilor Walsh?
Here.
Councilor Zarella?
Here.
Public forum. Anyone wishing to speak on any matter on the agenda may do so for not more than 2 minutes. If you are here addressing public hearing petitions, you'll have an opportunity to speak at that time. Please approach the center table and identify yourself by name and address for the record and the item number which you are addressing. Does anyone wish to speak at this time? Good evening. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Miko Nakagawa. I am a nurse in the emergency department at Leominster Hospital, but I'm actually a resident of Athol, 242 Brattle Street in Athol.
Thank you.
So, good evening, President Kushmarek and members of the City Council. I am a registered nurse, as I said, in the emergency department at UMass Memorial Health Alliance Clinton Hospital Leominster campus, which will always be known to me as Leominster Hospital. Even as I say that, the hospital looks less and less like the wonderful community hospital it once was. I've been there for 23 years, and it's not the place it was even 10 years ago. The nurses have been negotiating our contract with the hospital since August of last year. In our prior contract we negotiated in 2015, we were able to achieve patient safety measures that dramatically improved patient care. In 2015, a nurse's patient assignment could not, since then, we haven't been able to exceed 5 patients. We added stat nurse, whose role is to provide coverage and relief for medical surgical nurses whose patients need extra time and nursing attention. And we fought for and won contract language that the charge nurses on all units do not carry a patient assignment. So they help with the flow, and they help the other nurses be able to manage their assignments when their patients are very sick. So they focus on the flow of admissions and discharges and be a resource to the other nurses to assist in the event of a patient emergency. You must understand that the patients who are in the hospitals today are much sicker than they were 10 years ago. They're very, very sick. They're in the hospital because they need 24 hours of nursing care. Patients come to our emergency department because they are critically sick or injured. In this contract, the hospital is proposing to increase nurse patient assignments to 6 patients apiece on the inpatient units and have no limit to the emergency department nurses, would have unlimited number of patients. They are proposing that the change in nurses take full patient assignment, and the charge nurses take a full patient assignment, and want to do away with the stat nurses that helped in critical situations on the floors. Implementation of any one of these proposals will put patient safety at risk. And the hospital is adamant that they want all of these changes. And to do this, the hospital is currently in the process of eliminating 8 nursing positions in the emergency department. This is while they are amid an expansion to add more space and 15 more beds. And while we are facing the coronavirus pandemic, and we're not even yet through the flu season, without the cuts yet in place, our emergency department is bursting at the seams. We have ICU patients that are boarding because we don't have enough ICU beds, and so they wait in the emergency department. We have so many mental health patients that they can't even fit in our new mental health area. They're spread out into the main emergency department. We have patients waiting and waiting for hours on end for admission to medical surgical beds, all while the hospital is closed a med-surg unit where beds are sitting empty upstairs. Our managers call and send texts begging nurses to work because there aren't enough of us now, and in the emergency department to take care of patients there. And the patients and the ambulances keep coming. So when Fitchburg Fire Department transports to my emergency department, they can't leave because they have to be able to give us sign out and hand over the patient. So they're standing there waiting, keeping them from being able to address other emergencies. It's called holding the wall. It's what the hospital industry said would happen if question 1 passed. Well, question 1 did not pass because they are scared that the public and what it's happening right now. So the nurses are fighting for our patients. We will continue our fight for their safety and for our profession. We appreciate the support we are receiving from the community and from many of you. And we thank you for bringing up this matter in this forum. And we thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak at this time? Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you, Mr. President. Councilors, I'd just like to reiterate a little bit of what was just stated, and I think something we've been seeing for the last few months, if not last few years. I was on the original committee in 1998 for Jeff Bean when they started closing Burbank Hospital, and after many negotiations, it was one of our main topics and requests was to keep along with the cancer center, was to keep an urgent care center. So not only have we lost the urgent care center at Burbank, but now we've got our ambulances. As most of you know, we have 1 BLS and 2 ALS ambulances in the city to protect our 41,000 people plus another 8,000 college students and many more transport people that go through the city each day. And what we're seeing is our vehicles, our 2 paramedic trucks, which is critical, being tied up with longer wait times, waiting for beds, waiting for triage, waiting for whatever has to be done. Our BLS truck, which is staffed by our firefighters, is being tied up longer times. We transport about 5,700 911 calls a year down there, which is roughly 15, 16 calls a day. So we're pretty busy, and luckily MedStar Ambulance has additional ambulances that we use regularly. However, as most of you know that have scanners or listen to what's going on in the city, there's frequent times we have a number of ambulances tied up on 911 calls at the same time, and we've got people waiting on the gurneys down at the hospital to be placed in beds, rooms to be cleaned out so the next patient can come in. And I think there's more critical issues coming up now of who owns the patient while they're on the gurney in the hospital. Is it still the ambulance people that own these patients and have to continue to treat them? Is it the hospital? So there's more questions than answers coming up and coming forward. However, we need to see a properly staffed emergency department down there, a nursing side, on maintenance of getting the rooms ready for people, on triage, and it affects us because now our ambulances aren't available for our citizens. We're tying up 2 firefighters, if not more. Sometimes we have to have an engine company go to assist the medics with a critical call. So we've also seen the migration of a lot of calls going to Worcester. Stroke victims all have to go to Worcester now. Pediatrics have now been moved to Worcester. So we're going to see longer and longer. That's going to affect our department. It's going to affect the service to our citizens, and most importantly, it's going to affect the community as a whole. So we'd like to see something, certainly, and I know we've dealt with the different ownership and executive people at the hospital. I'm not trying to tell them their business, but we need to be heard, and we need to make sure the situation gets corrected before we have further losses.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, councilors.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, councils. I'm going to be brief. I'd like to reiterate what Chief Roy just stated. Obviously, the police department is in full support of the resolution that's going to be in front of the council this evening. This impacts not only our fire department and our EMTs and paramedics responding to Leominster Hospital, but it impacts the entire city. and every police officer that's working in the city. So I just wanted to speak this evening to say that the police department is in full support of this resolution. We stand behind the nurses, we stand behind their efforts at Leominster Hospital, and we hope that the vote goes accordingly this evening. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening.
Evening, councilors. Patrick Haverty, I'm the Vice President of the Fitchburg Fires Local Union. Just wanted to come up here in support of the resolution. Our union is fully supported behind the nurses' union in this resolution. Don't want to reiterate everything that was said tonight, but you know, our firefighters are on that ambulance, and we want to be here to protect the citizens of Fitchburg. So when we bring our ambulance to Leominster Hospital, we want to get that fast turnaround and get our firefighters back here for the city. We support the resolution. We stand with the nurses' union, and we support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak at this time? Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too am a signatory of this resolution, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say that I certainly stand with the nurses who have been dealing with these erosions of services, so to speak, over these many years. And just a story to kind of put it into context. A little 3-year-old girl that I know very well broke her arm. And this is just a small example, I'll grant you that. She had to go to Worcester to have her arm taken care of. And follow-up visits had to be in Worcester. It was just kind of outrageous to me that we can't even provide that basic a service here in the North County. This is a community hospital. It's for the people of the community. And the services continue to be eroded and taken away. I don't believe they've lived up to their promises, the administration, with the behavioral health issues that still exist in the emergency department. My understanding is there are still people that are there for hours and days sometimes. This is just unacceptable. And part of what we're saying is enough is enough. Thank you.
Councilor DiNatale, this is still public forum. We'll have an opportunity to speak on this matter.
Right, I was going to ask after it's done if we could take it out of order.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna do that.
Thank you.
Councilman.
I'd actually move that we take it out of order and we suspend the rules as well.
Second.
We have a motion and second for suspension of the rules and to take resolution, excuse me, Councilors, I apologize, 6220 out of order. Speaking on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The matter is before us. Councilors, before we do that, I just have, I have 2 items. First, I'm going to read this resolution, and then I've received a formal communication, which we'll read into the record from Representative Hay. And then Councilor DiNatale, you'll be next. Be it resolved that the City of Fitchburg is resolute in its condemnation of any action that would jeopardize patient safety and community access to quality health care at UMass Memorial Health Alliance Clinton Hospital Leominster campus. It's a mouthful. Whereas health services in the UMass Memorial Healthcare Leominster Hospital catchment area have been terminated at an alarming rate in Fitchburg and neighboring communities, including 1. The 2010 closure of a 15-bed psychiatric unit at Burbank Hospital. 2, the 2017 UMass Memorial Health Alliance shuttering of pediatric services at the hospital's Leominster campus. 3, the 2017 closing of the cardiac and respiratory rehabilitation departments at the hospital's Leominster campus. And 4, the 2018 closure of the Burbank Urgent Care Center. And whereas in many instances, as a result of holding public hearings, the Department of Public Health has determined that these services were considered essential health services, and elimination of such services would leave many patients and residents without reliable health care. And whereas the elimination of these services not only has a profoundly negative impact on the care of patients in these communities, but also puts further strain on our health care system. And whereas UMass Memorial Health Alliance Clinton Hospital seeks to increase patient-to-nurse ratios by at least 20% on registered nurses and emergency room department nurses by eliminating the positions of stat nurses and charge nurses, while simultaneously expanding emergency department beds and space. And whereas the proposed staff reductions, coupled with the increased reliance on Leominster campus by municipal public safety offices, as evidenced by the 2019 annual reports demonstrating that the Fitchburg Police conducted more than 1,100 calls related to mental health, suicide and substance abuse, and the Fitchburg Fire Department conducted approximately 5,400 medical transports each year, as evidenced by the previous 3-year annual reports, will result in increased and prolonged wait times for Fitchburg public safety officials at the Leominster campus, thus impacting resource allocation and budgets. As reason, therefore, the City of Fitchburg finds that it is imperative to support comprehensive community health care, adequate hospital staffing levels, and current nurse-patient ratios. This was submitted by Councilors Michael Kushmarek and Elizabeth Walsh and Mayor Stephen L. DiNatale. Councilors, we received this communication from Representative Hay this evening. He communicated with me earlier today when it became apparent he was going to have to remain at the State House. Dear Fitchburg City Council members, unfortunately, due to obligations at the State House, I will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. I want to make sure that you all understand that I support your resolution regarding the MNA's safe staffing levels. Nurses are the gatekeepers to patients' well-being. It puts both patient and nurse in danger when staff levels are reduced. It is important that we as elected officials stand with and show our support for the MNA. This is an issue that affects all of our city's residents and all of the nurses that care for our residents. I am proud that the Fitchburg City Council continues to be a strong advocate for safe nursing levels. Regards, Representative Stephen Hay. Councilor DiNatale.
Thank you. It's obviously the resolution is, I hate to start off by sounding like a defeatist, but I feel like it's getting increasingly frustrating with the recent events that we've had with Unitil and Health Alliance. These companies that are showing a blatant disregard for the communities that they do business in. And I said at the Unitil hearing, and I think it applies here, that the more I hear and read about all of these things happening, 2010, 2014, they're not getting the message, or I think they don't care. I can't think of any other reason why this continues to happen. Now, I am in the private sector. I am a budgetary director for my division, so I understand bottom lines and cost allocations and overheads and all that stuff, but and I don't know their financials, but you know, it almost is at the point now where it's almost like, why don't they just go away? What good are they serving this community right now? They are slowly but surely abandoning North Central Massachusetts. And if it was a one-time instance, I could understand the arguments, but it's been a period of excuses and sob stories of why all of this keeps occurring. What's the next shoe to drop after this? I don't know. Now, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and my wife, frankly, is terrified. She's still terrified from what happened, what was it, last year, 2 years ago, when they took out the pediatric unit. You know, and the mayor alluded to it about, you know, a routine fracture in an arm, you have to go to Worcester, and then keep going there. It's scary that you have to go that length to get basic services. And when we hear about you're supposed to be a community hospital, I ask myself, even though I'm not huge on regulatory movements, where is the regulators here? I'm sick and tired of hearing about DPH. To me, they're useless, okay? And if the legislature can impose anything, so be it, but when we had that hearing at the, my memory is very bad, it was either at the Doubletree or was at the Great Wolf. Doubletree, for when they shut down the pediatric unit, amongst other things. You know, it was made clear before we all talked, well, we can't really do anything about it. I mean, but then I said to myself, if their charter is to serve the community, and that has ramifications, Who on God's green earth above the hospital is saying that this is, in a regulatory fashion, is saying this is servicing the community in an effective and efficient manner? I don't, who's making this decision? So they're getting away with it under the guise that they're serving the community. They're not. Who is responsible for determining if they're following what they should be doing? I'm assuming it's a state regulatory agency that's asleep at the wheel, and I'm not shocked by that. So, because most often, and I'm going to go after them, most of these state regulators don't live here, all right? So they pretend they care, but they don't, all right? So, just like Unitil, I sit here and I listen to the comments made, and I listen to the statements made from the elected officials, and I ask myself, because I'm a realist, what good is this going to do? How many times are we going to pass resolutions to these folks and have it fall on deaf ears, and they're just going to keep cutting? Someone above us has got to do something about it, or get the hell out of Dodge, you know. But I'm very upset because what is next? What's next? Because I have a 3 and a 1-year-old, I've had to utilize the hospital quite a bit the last few years. These nurses are rock stars. I didn't appreciate what nurses do, just like teachers, or because I'm not in that field. I'm a calculator guy, all right? But when I got to see up close and personal what these men and women deal with every day, I thank God I'm not doing it, you know? And to hear that they're going to cut back even more services, they're going to saddle them with more responsibility. Again, this is not a one-off. This is a routine occurrence. Where is the breaking point if it hasn't already been reached? And it probably has. I wouldn't know that because I'm not close to it. But I just come back to that overall theory that these guys are getting away with it. They continuously get away with this. There's no ramification for them, which leads me to believe they sit back. And of course, when we have these meetings, no one from these companies are here to talk about it because they don't care, because they know it's not going to matter. They're going to do what they want to do. So I just wanted to make those comments out of frustration. I'm going to obviously support the resolution. I don't know what's going to happen after this point, but I really fear for the future after this happens. You know, what's next? And I want to thank the nurses for what they do and continue to do every day. And what even adds more weight to this whole issue is the police and the fire chief and the fire union. These are medical and public safety personnel that are telling us this is scary. I don't recall ever hearing that level of concern from these gentlemen in the past up until this point. That adds more weight to this for me. When you got the fire department, the police department saying this is not good. Again, I know Representative Hay talked, and I don't know where, I know Senator Tran, I believe I know he supports this community as well, but where does it go beyond? Who at the regulatory level is looking at this and saying, you guys are following the community charter that you were set up to follow? They're not. And if they think they are, then they need to take their sick one over to here and be rejected and have them go back to where they came from to see what it feels like. Thank you.
Councilor Zarella.
So, I am also not a big regulatory guy. I think generally government should keep its nose out of private business, but this is not a private business. This is a nonprofit. This is a community hospital. In private business, if we were talking a for-profit clinic or something, sure, do whatever the bottom line dictates. That's why you exist, to make money for your shareholders. But this is not that kind of organization. And the kind of policy changes and behaviors that we've heard described and seen happen, they seem outrageous to me. But what do I know? I mean, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm a lawyer. I don't do this stuff. I don't know how this stuff works. And I don't trust government officials who don't do this stuff to make decisions for professionals like this. I don't trust myself to do it. But I do trust our police department, and I do trust our fire department, and I do trust all the professionals, the nurses who are here tonight. And so if all of them are saying, this is ridiculous, we can't do our jobs under these conditions, that's all I need to know about whether it's going to work or not. If I could spend hours at home researching these issues and looking at how it's done across the country and so on, but at the end of the day, I'd be an educated layman. These are people who live this, and they're telling us that this is going to destroy quality of care. Now, if this was just part of an across-the-board austerity measure, I could kind of see how it would make sense. If it's just, we don't have enough money for anything, so we've got to cut everything. Okay, I kind of get it. It's better to stay open than to not stay open. Though, I've remarked before with respect to the city, if you cut too deep, eventually you bleed out. But also, I don't see that being the case. We're hearing that they're cutting in some areas and expanding in others. That tells me this isn't purely a financial issue. This is a policy issue. And like my colleague said, we don't see their finances. We don't know what their books look like. But that's clearly not the issue. They have money to do other things. They should have money to do this. You don't major on the minors. You don't pump your money into the things that have less impact, even if they may have, I don't know, more visual glamour, and take away from the cogs and gears, the things that keep the system running day to day. And I certainly don't mean that in any kind of derogatory or diminutive sort of way. People talk about people being cogs, and it's usually saying, you know, they're very low value, they're replaceable. That's not what I mean. I mean, these are the people who keep the system running. You pull them out, and the system grinds to a halt. So I am very much in favor of this resolution, and I also wish there was something more we could do than put a message in a bottle and hope that someone reads it.
Councilor Kuchar.
Thank you very much. Much like Councilor Di Natale and Councilor Zarella, I too am not a regulatory person, but I've been able to see what you guys do firsthand. My wife is a nurse, and I was in a very bad car accident about 2 years ago, and I got brought up to Leominster Hospital. But unfortunately for me, that day was spree day 2 years ago, which I had no idea until people started flocking in the doors. And then I saw the emergency room go into overdrive. You guys have a hard job. And I'm in full support of this resolution. And we do need to find out who to go to. Who's the next step? Because before you know it, you're going to have one nurse for the whole emergency room. And that's just ridiculous. So I will vote in favor of the resolution.
Councilor Green.
Like years previous, I'm a huge supporter of all the nursing staff. I believe the NMA does what they can to resolve these issues, but don't kid yourself. This is a for-profit company. This is a for-profit management system. And when you get for-profit that places more value on their bottom line and their bonuses and hiring management versus skilled nursing care, that's where we run into trouble. And we've seen this over and over again with this management company that owns this hill. The fact that I think, 70 or 80% of the nurses got their pink slip last week, but yet These are people dedicated to the fact that they will not walk out on patients, which happen to be our loved ones, our family members, our neighbors, our friends. They won't do it. But instead, they're faced with being brutalized, being attacked, being unvalued. The fact that 1,100 mental health patients or issues came through that door, and we still haven't come to the fact that this community needs a mental health hospital, is beyond comprehension to me. And the fact that we continue to see patients on a regular basis who are billed out for services at the highest rate possible because they're being seen in an emergency room, where if we had clinics available for those patients to go to for a cost of a copay versus what the ER department has to charge back to our insurance companies, that figure may change around. I also want to bring up the fact that this management company is also looking to outsource the security officers that are charged with the security of not only these nurses, but the patients that are there in the hospital, to a company that can't find any real background information on. Nobody has any answers about, are they hands-on, are they hands-off? What will they be allowed to do when we've got not only patients that become unruly, but more often than not, family members of patients that become unruly? That puts everybody, not only the nurses, but your loved one that's in the, laying in the gurney in the hallway, or your family member that's laying, in the bed next door, having to hear this outrageous behavior. So I'm not sure how we as a community can stand more alongside you, or I'm not sure what this community needs to give the MNA the power to say that you absolutely have to take back this hill. There's another hill we're fighting for. But it's ridiculous that we, every 4 years, have to continue to have this conversation with even more dire outcome if we don't do anything about it. So I commend each and every one of you for showing up to work every day, to putting my family and my friends above your own. I know that a lot of you are working on pink slips, which blows my mind on, why you just don't walk out. But I commend you for not walking out. And again, this is not a nurses need more money issue. This is an issue about patient safety. And the only way that you can guarantee patient safety is to have an absolute handle on those numbers. So again, I will support this until there's nothing, until there's nothing else, until every stone has been unturned to get you the help and the resources that you need in order to help us as a community. So thank you.
Counselor Boschman.
The only thing, I don't want to repeat what everybody else said, but I do have a question for both chiefs. And my question to the chief is this: if you send the ambulance down there,
Counselor, you can ask a rhetorical question, but this
I'll ask you to ask it. Do we get paid when the men are down there? That's all I want to know. If you're spending 2 hours down there and they're not in the city of Fitchburg, are they paying these guys to be there, to stay with the patients? That's all I want to know. If not, why not?
the city is still paying to have, our resources down
But
there.
is the hospital paying us back for our men to be down there to babysit? That's my question.
No, Counselor.
We don't send a bill?
That'd be nice.
Whatever the going rate for an ambulance bill, depending on what the insurance is for the individual, Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, we just get that. It doesn't go on an hourly basis, doesn't go how long into the, it's a set rate, and that's what the payment is. It goes back to our collection agency, and then we get it back with our contract with the ambulance, or in our case with our firefighters. But we don't get additional money because we're staying there longer.
Oh, okay, that's all I wanted to know. And good luck to you. Thank you very much.
Counselor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you think of all of the cutbacks that they're suggesting, if you take them individually, each of them would affect patient care. The fact that you're adding a patient, and some people have said, well, what difference does it make, 5 or 6 patients? If you are that patient, it makes a lot of difference, because each of these nurses, every day, the care that they give each individual patient takes a lot of time. And if you add an additional patient, that means less time for those other patients that they don't have. The fact that they're taking away the stat nurse and the charge nurse, the fact that it would be unlimited emergency department patients for nurses in the emergency department. Taken together as a whole, the effect on patient care is incredibly devastating. 13 years ago, my husband had a brain aneurysm and went to Leominster Hospital. And at that point in time, he did have sufficient care. He was taken by ambulance immediately into Boston. He had surgery, and he's fine. I think today, if that were the case, I would be very concerned for not only his personal care, but for his life. And I hope that UMass listens and takes some action. Thank you.
Councilors, you heard earlier, Chief Roy talked about 1998. This conversation was going on. 1998, and they said, don't worry, we're going to close the hospital to save lives by moving the hospital to Leominster. We're going to consolidate, we'll have an incredible resource to this community, but don't worry, you're still going to have all of the other services. Well, 2 years ago, they just closed what they promised they would never do, along with almost every other service available to our community in Burbank. And we listed 4 of them, but we could go on for 4 pages. For every time they've said, don't worry, we're here for you. We hear you, and we'd never close this next service. We just need to close this one to save the bottom line. And it's been this slow withdrawal for the past 22 years since 1998. Service after service. And it's not just staying in Leominster. Now they're removing those services and going to Worcester. And what happens is each time they close those units, they're affecting the most vulnerable in our communities. I'm fortunate, right? I can get in the car and I can drive my loved one to Leominster, to Clinton, to Gardner, to Worcester, to Boston. Think about those in our community that don't have access to public transportation. And if you've ever relied on public transportation, you know how reliable that is. Try to get a bus from Fitchburg to Worcester in the middle of the night to see your loved one. Your child in intensive care, and you're trying to find a way to get to Worcester. That's not a hypothetical. That happens each and every day in our community. And it's been happening for a few years now, because each and every service they remove out of our area. And they'll tell you that they need to do this because the hospital isn't as busy as it used to be. I'm not seeing that reflected in our annual reports of the number of transports we're doing, the number of calls to our police station. I'm not seeing that anecdotally when I'm going down there. Just a few years ago, I saw my mother wait 72 hours in the hallway waiting for care because there wasn't enough space. So on one hand, they'll tell you, it's so busy, we need to expand our ER. We need more rooms, more beds, that people are waiting in hallways for 72 hours while they're in agony and wondering when their family can come visit, staring up at a ceiling like the one we're under now for days on end without seeing daylight, no windows in the hallway. And then next they'll say, well, there's not enough business here, so we need to cut nurses. Well, which is it? Because you're spending millions of dollars expanding your ER and you're in a capital campaign to expand your hospital's complex at the same time as you're saying we don't have enough business to keep employing our nurses. It sounds like conflicting messaging there. It sounds like it's mismanagement from the top on down. Just a couple of years ago, they were reporting massive budget surpluses. What happened to those surpluses? Were they incapable of projecting what would happen? Did they not know that service was going to increase? In any other industry, if this was a private industry, those CEOs would be fired and terminated and the entire management would be turned over. But yet they're rewarded. It's really staggering to me. You know, my wife and I want to have a child, you know, or children in the next few years. And will she be delivering that baby in Leominster? Unfortunately, probably not. It's probably going to have to be Worcester. Think about that. And think about, once again, the vulnerable communities that disproportionately impacts. But you know what that also does is it stunts our growth as a community. To tell any young professional who's looking to start a family, we as a city are talking about economic growth and we're saying, come out to Fitchburg and Leominster, come out to north central Massachusetts. We're on the rail, the cost of living is better here. This is an opportunity for you to live in the heart of an urban environment in the downtown. It's a wonderful pitch for us, and we have so many great things going for us. But if you can't deliver your child without doing a 45 to 1 hour drive, well, that's not a very attractive place to make that argument. So, if they're trying to save their bottom line, they have to be attuned to what's happening in the environment in which they're operating. And it's very clear. Councilor Di Natale spoke about it earlier, about serving the charter of the organization. They're tone deaf. They clearly don't hear, and they clearly don't care about the mission of serving the community that they exist within. They don't care about the vulnerable communities that they disproportionately impact every time they move their services. And I don't think they care about this community at all. So when we're stuck with empty facilities in Fitchburg and Clinton and in Leominster a decade from now, and we're all driving 45 or 50 minutes, they won't care. And I'm sure at some point they'll tell the residents of Worcester, I'm sorry, we're doing this for the bottom line. And to all of the councilors' points that have spoken this evening, what can we do? I don't know, but I think, you know, I'm sick of this slow retreat. It's constant. I don't want to be here in another year with another resolution. I want to be here with a robust hospital, with safe and fair working conditions for our nurses and professional, healthcare delivers. If we're going to be a vibrant community, it's a non-negotiable standpoint for us. So, as our nurses go and as our hospital goes, so goes our community. So, I don't know what more we can do tonight, but I think this is a good start. Councilor Squalia.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that attended this meeting tonight and advocates for this issue. I'll certainly be voting for this resolution, and I just wanted to thank you for advocating for this issue and really educating us and educating the public about what you do and the importance and what's happening to you. Thank you.
Councilor Schultz.
I agree with Councilor Kuchmarek. It looks like the plan is to eventually close the hospital. I mean, if you remove enough services, you've got nothing left. You've got nothing left. So I don't know what the next step is. I would certainly be in favor of inviting these people to a council meeting and having a question and answer period, but I don't know if they'd come, you know. So, yeah, I'm definitely voting in favor of the resolution, and thank you. I want to offer thanks to all the nurses and people that work at the hospital. They do a great job.
Motion to accept the resolution?
Second.
I have a motion and second to accept 06220 in the resolution. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight and spoke on this important issue. Thank you. Councilors, if there are no objections, we'll now hear an oral report from the Appointments Committee, which met earlier this evening and took up the following reappointments. There were two reappointments for the Fitchburg Cultural Council for Mr. James Cragen and Claudia Stevens. Claudia was with us this evening. Both were passed unanimously. The Chief Procurement Officer was a reappointment as well for Ms. Mary Delaney. That too was passed unanimously. And lastly, we had a new appointment for Student Associate Member to the Human Rights Commission, for Ms. Miriam Azref, and that too was adopted unanimously.
Motion to approve?
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve. Speaking on the motion, Counsel Jean
Very
Natale.
briefly, I just wanted to say that, with respect to the procurement, the procurement director, another phenomenal employee of this city. And I know from past experience, that that department has not functioned properly. And that was quickly taken care of with this person. So, as far as I'm concerned, I will never hesitate to approve her reappointment over and over again. And a lot of what she's done for the city, no one sees. But I know from speaking to department heads, the log jam has been lifted, and her knowledge of procurement law and the bypasses and going through all those hoops and ladders is second to none. We really got a steal from Gardner. I'm sure the Gardner mayor would love me saying that. Thank you.
They don't have a Gardner mayor.
Oh, right. The former Gardner mayor, who's already told me he couldn't stand that we have her here. So.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. Communications from His Honor the Mayor. We have 3 letters of appointments, which will all be sent to the Appointments Committee unless there are any objections. And those are for Mr. Brian Gallagher as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Ms. Tracy McGrath as a member of the Planning Board, and Mr. Gregory Babineau as an associate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Seeing no objections, those will be sent to appointments. We have one additional communication from His Honor the Mayor, Community Development Block Grant Year 46. And councilors, if no objections, we'll send that to the Finance Committee. Seeing none, that's what we'll do. Next, we have we have a communication, for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation regarding bridge improvements. I believe, were you presenting on that this evening, or were we simply sending this to the, to a committee? We'll send this to the Public Works Committee, unless there is any objection. Seeing none. And next, we have a special presentation, the Organics to Energy presentation by West Group and the Fitchburg Wastewater Division. I'd like to invite Deputy Commissioner Jeff Morofsky to join us, as well as the associates from the West Group. Good evening, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With me tonight is Attorney Stephen Torres from West Group Law. This report centers on the repurposing of an underutilized city property, the West Plant. The city has 2 treatment plants that were built in the 1970s with Clean Water Act financing. The West Plant on Princeton Road is grossly underutilized because it no longer treats wastewater. It solely functions as a pumping station. So since approximately 2013, we've been pursuing investigations of what could we do with this property and also help out the wastewater enterprise. And what we pursued at that time was an organics to energy feasibility study. And what we were looking at doing is taking our biosolids and other sources of organics in the Fitchburg area, both within the city and surrounding radius of the city. And could we do something with that to generate a biogas and in turn potentially generate some revenue that would offset some costs? So we received a feasibility study from the consultant we were working with at the time in 2016. And the end conclusion of that is that a project was both technically and economically feasible under those then current conditions. Since that time, the project has been backburnered for some time. We have had opportunities to see what a facility like this is in person. We've gone to GLSD twice, Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, to see their anaerobic digestion process. Since that time, the city reached out to West Group Law. West Group Law has expertise in public sector law, procurement, public-private partnerships, water and wastewater, and also energy. So the nexus of all these specialities was a very good fit for what we were trying to accomplish with the West Plant property. So with a prospective project, we had a number of objectives we were trying to fulfill. I'll just run through those really quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Attorney Torres. Number one, we were looking to usefully repurpose an underutilized city wastewater property asset, the former West Plant on Princeton Road. Two, we were trying to address and mitigate long-term sustainability of the wastewater enterprise's need for cost-effective wastewater treatment solids, residual management, and disposal for reduced operating natural gas and electrical costs of the subject property. Just as a quick aside, in calendar year 2019, we treated over 3 billion gallons of wastewater, and in the course of treating 3 billion gallons of wastewater, we generated approximately 14,000 cubic yards of biosolids. This is sludge that comes out of the wastewater in the course of treatment, and that's approximately 9,000 tons. Once upon a time, we had an incinerator, and that would reduce that same material I talked about to ash, and then we would landfill the ash. But since the cessation of the incineration process, we've been dewatering that sludge, and we've been landfilling it at the Westminster and Fitchburg Westminster landfill. And as we know, there's some capacity concerns and what the life cycle of the landfill disposal site is, and the long-term sustainability of the wastewater enterprise. We're going to keep generating these materials as a byproduct of treatment. Objective 3, provide the most beneficial project life cycle, the design, the construction, the operation, the maintenance costs, first to the wastewater enterprise and secondly to the city. Objective 4, provide the most beneficial project to the city in terms of host benefits realized. Number 5, divert organic waste that may otherwise be useful for an anaerobic digestion feedstock away from the landfill, diverting these organics away from the landfill disposal, saving some of the storage capacity of the landfill. Number 6, competitively market and attractive organic waste sources generated to use the repurposed facility for final disposition of organic substrates. And lastly, to pursue project procurement and facilitation, construction, operation, maintenance in a manner acceptable to the wastewater enterprise. With that, I'll turn it over to Attorney Torres.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, Madam Clerk, and Mr. Solicitor. My name is Stephen Torres. I'm a partner in the Providence and Boston offices of West Group Law. I focus my practice on leading the firm's environmental construction and energy practice group and litigation. I'm happy to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the project. Our firm will assist the city in the procurement aspects of a potential either biosolids to energy, biosolids to fuel project. The recommendation that we have given to the city is to approach it in a bifurcated fashion with respect to the procurement, begin with a non-binding procurement doctrine that's commonly used to kick off one of these projects. That's called the request for expressions of interest. The request for expressions of interest is commonly used in complex energy and environmental projects like this, complex construction projects, to get a message, an invitation to industry that here is Fitchburg, here is the biosolids situation that the commissioner has just described for you. Here are the transactional options that you have, lease, ownership, energy management services. Here are the project delivery options. We'd like you to comment on design, build, operate, design, build, finance, own, operate, transfer. So it is the essential invitation to industry to first become familiar with Fitchburg, second, become familiar with your biosolids opportunities, third, become familiar with your interest in partnering with industry to achieve the objectives just talked about. Through that transactional document, we are able to get responses to identify available technologies, available and interested technologies. We have a general idea of what's available. We have a general idea what the industry is. This will be vendors coming forward and saying we're specifically interested in putting this type of project in Fitchburg and operating on this type of transactional ownership model, this type of operations model. From that information, we're able to determine the best method to design your binding procurement document, which is your request for proposals, and it's only binding upon issuing a contract and having execution and having security in place. But the more formal portion of the procurement is the request for proposals. This document is more detailed and more involved than the request for expression of interest. With the request for expression of interest, we're identifying the technologies, the finance models, the vendors that are interested, the offtake, whether it's energy, whether it's fuels, whether there are what we call residuals or byproducts for sale, such as compost, vitrified aggregate, which is a byproduct of a gasification process, and we identify all those opportunities. By doing that, we are able to shape your procurement document, which is a request for proposals, which is a more detailed and qualified document where we are asking for formal proposals. In the first phase, it's expressions of interest, so you know which opportunities are available for the city. In the request for proposals, we're asking for specific information, which include price, technology, schedule, permittability, revenue share with the city, host community opportunity for the city, a company's financial wherewithal to back a project like this, their team. A lot of times the technology provider is coupled with what we call an EPC, which is essentially your general contractor that builds the project. They may be coupled with a finance team. One of the issues will be whether you use public or private finance. The beauty of these jobs, they're quite often able to use off-the-book type of financings that don't affect your bonding capacity, which I know Jeff has indicated to me is an important part of the process. So those are generally the steps we take, and our approach is to ensure that through the expression of interest, we have a non-prescriptive and broad process that brings the most opportunities to the table. When we get to the request for proposal, it's highly critical, it's highly prescriptive, it's highly evaluative to make sure that the vendor that you select, if you choose to go forward with the project, has been vetted, is the best available situation, provides you with what we call, as Mary would tell you if you were here, the best value procurement, the best overall process, and the best overall engagement for the city. And when we look at this, there's a lot of complex issues with respect to revenues, royalties, fees, because you have tip fees with respect to your sludge merchant opportunities, whether we're doing a lease or a sale transaction or an energy management under another statute, 25A, whether that is your best bet because you have an energy offtake, net metering. There's not a lot of availability in the public cap right now. It's most likely that you'll be under the tariff. Somebody will be doing a power purchase agreement with you. That is another agreement that we would do for you. Our standard with respect to these type of procurements, and as Mary would probably agree with me if she were here, the best way to do these procurements is to have business terms in your document. They understand what your negotiable and non-negotiable terms are. That helps a vendor price their risk and price their costs in a deal. So those are general parameters of how we try to approach these projects. Those are the general parameters of a procurement. And I think the most important thing is that the city is protected through the process, through security interests, and that you have a very, very extensive evaluation process that involves your professionals in the city, our guidance, your outside engineers when the time is right, and that you essentially end up with something that you can benefit from for the next 20 to 25 years.
Gentlemen, I'm curious about, I understand such facilities can typically accommodate more than just one particular municipality. So in this case, I know this is early on in the stage, but I'm curious if we were to end up with a facility that would have excess capacity. We have an item that's before us later on that talks about, you know, our tie-in in connection with Westminster, where we receive and process some of their wastewater. I'm curious, would this be an opportunity, and at what stage could we explore something like a regionalization or quasi-regionalization of anaerobic digestion centered in Fitchburg?
Well, historically, when we did have the incinerator operating, we were a regional hub, and a number of different treatment plants from around the state of Massachusetts sent their wastewater residuals to Fitchburg, and we would incinerate that. So we had agreements with a number of communities, Leominster included, and we had to sever those agreements or let them expire when we were no longer continuing with the incinerator operation. So it's not just Fitchburg wastewater that is concerned about Fitchburg wastewater's biosolids. It's every treatment plant in Massachusetts is concerned about their biosolids. And that's just one component of organic substrates that could possibly be coming to this facility as a fuel feedstock. But every wastewater treatment plant in Massachusetts is getting tighter and tighter, and landfill space is running out. So viable solutions going forward, we could potentially recapture a similar type of model that we had once upon a time with incineration.
And you ask a very good question, Mr. Council President, because we try to design the procurement, as Jeff has indicated, with respect to the prior intermunicipal agreements you had. Merchant material is certainly most beneficial for the city because you lower your cost by getting a portion of the tip fee that comes in for that and a higher resale value because you're putting out more energy. So the second part of your question was timing of that. I think that one of the things that's important is these projects is when we call what we call aggregating the waste stream. At what point did we do that and whose responsibility is it? Is it the city's responsibility to aggregate a waste stream and hand it to the contractor, or does the contractor go out and aggregate the waste stream? And that is one of the things we'll ask in the RFEI, the contractor's preference and role in that, but also during that time, once this RFEI is on the street and the other municipalities and their haulers know that this project is real, they very well may be calling Jeff and saying, we'd like to commit our merchant stream there for and these other substrates there. And we will be working on that between the RFEI and the RFP in aggregating that waste stream with you. And I know, as Jeff, the commissioner said, the deputy commissioner said, there's a lot of work that's been done on that historically. It's a very good feasibility study. If I had any critique of it, it would only be that it was focused entirely on anaerobic digestion and limited, substrates and limited streams, and that there are other technologies that are available as well. That's why the RFEI goes out and is a follow-up on the feasibility study. It was a good feasibility study. It was a very good product, and it was the predicate for this process.
Wonderful. Certainly there's numerous benefits here. Excited, that we can both reduce the amount of space, or reduce the amount of waste that we're then putting in our landfills, and then, so we have an opportunity for not only savings in our landfill, but an opportunity to generate revenue. And certainly, if we can multiply that revenue and come in by some quasi-regionalization or some sort of articulation agreement with our neighboring communities, that'd be a wonderful asset and complement to this. So excited that we're at this point where we're now starting to discuss and further assess. So thank you both, Councilor Green.
Thank you. I've been a fan of anaerobic digestion for a long time. I was hooked ever since we went for that first tour, and the benefits of that. Are we entertaining a public-private type of relationship with this project moving forward?
Yes, that is what we would express in the RFP that we're looking for, public-private partnership, and the parameters that are going to be up to the city as we get through the RFEI stage. What level of public operation ownership is the city interested in? What level of finance, design, build, construction, operation is the private sector interested in?
And do we let the private individual come in and help us set those parameters, or do you, meaning the experts, already have laid out what that's going to look like for us as a community, like what we are comfortable committing to, or are we going to let the private company, the interested party, come in and say, I can do all of it, or I can only do a third of it, I'm only interested in this, the city will have to pick up the rest?
The RFEI, that's a very good question. The RFEI will structure that question precisely. We'll ask industry what portions of the transaction they want to be responsible for, what portions the city wants to be responsible for. We'll compile those answers into your final recommendation and report after we've worked with your city officials to ascertain which ones work to your advantage. So we'll cast a broad net, and they'll give you different scenarios. From that, our plan through the RFEI is to work with the city and then determine that a public-private partnership with a design, build, own, operate, transfer back to the city at end of 25 years is your best opportunity to put in your RFP. Or you can have alternatives in your RFP. Bid on a design, build, finance, own, operate, or build on a design, build, operate, where we own the asset. Do you want to lease, do a ground lease and have them construct it with private finance money? Or do you want to have them operate a public facility that you fund through revenue bonds? Those are the exact type of things that we'll be ascertaining from the RFEI and then recommend to the administration and the council as to what best works for you based on those responses.
And knowing the site or the square footage and the layout of that plant already, how quickly, and only because I know that this is popular, only because we would be one of only a few regional areas that offer this, how quickly would we be at capacity where we would have to start turning people away? I mean, I know that Wind River is a big vendor already that's hauling out of state because people are at capacity with anaerobic digestion. So I want to make sure that if we're projecting a 25-year project, you know what I mean, where we get revenue, that we're not going to be at capacity turning people away because we're so overloaded with everybody else's crap.
And of course, you want to have yours would always have the priority.
Right, our crap should always be priority, right?
That is one of the beauties of the RFP. You can look for facilities that are built in compartmentalized vessels, so that if you get another 15,000 tons per day, and you've got a lot of demand out there for that, they can add another line or another processing facility.
Like a modular upgrade of the process.
Okay, so we're going to use the existing structure as the base and then kind of build upon that?
If the demand if the demand drove us in that direction, we would have that capability.
And again, added to the language that if this private, I'm going to say investor for lack of a better word, comes in and agrees to that's built into the language that says, you know, hey, it may be your burden to expand this facility to take on more product. I just want to make sure that the wording is right and that, 'cause I don't think that we're going to have any problem finding vendors to take on this project. I think that people are wanting it, and that we're kind of in a unique situation where we've got it to be able to offer, and that we should do it right so that the city of Fitchburg gets our share of what should be returned to us as profit on having this valuable piece of property that we can do this to.
Exactly, because your revenues are based upon the volume that comes in and the electricity or fuel that's sold. So, you know, you design a system that maximizes that benefit while minimizing your cost.
Would that, the revenue that we make from this, would that ever be able to offset our obligation through wastewater enterprise funding?
Well, this is all very premature to get into these types of details. As we said, we're at the RFEI process right now, and that's an open process. We haven't even gotten to the prescriptive process, which is the RFP process, nor have we gotten to the process of selecting a proposer and engaging a contract that's going to have all the prescriptive provisions in it that protects the city's best interests. So it's premature to do that. This is cost offsetting, and then if there's more than just cost offsetting, then I think what you're driving at is this the magic pill to solve all the rate problems. And I think if you were to think that, then you're being overly optimistic.
Right.
But it would help defray costs, to be sure.
Thank you.
Counselor Squalia.
Thank you. With your knowledge of the 2016 feasibility study for the anaerobic digestion and, visiting the other facilities, when you put out this RFEI, do you believe that regionally, that what kind of demand we'll have regionally? You said in Lawrence they have one. How many communities do they serve, for example? Is there anything in the study that would reference how many communities we might serve?
And that one, I believe, was done by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and they are a regional group. I think you would have, depending on how your facility is constructed and what your capacity is, that would determine the radius in which people haul the biosolids here, or as source-separated organics moves forward. For instance, you have a couple of facilities locally that are covered by that 1 ton a week limit, so they have to, once there's a facility that they can divert source-separate organics, so you have the opportunity. So I think that you would have a very good opportunity to bring in merchant sludge, and I think the radius would be determined by cost. So if it's cheaper for them to bring their sewer sludge here than where they're hauling it out of state or railing it out of state, or bringing it to single processes like a co-compost. So on a co-compost, their tip fees are going to be higher than on a facility that produces energy or fuel as an offtake and residuals, because the equation is always based on 2 things: the tip fee and the sale of offtake, either electrical or fuel, and residue such as compost. So it all becomes a cost exercise for these municipalities. Is it cheaper for me to haul it here, pay Fitchburg's tip fee, or to continue to go to another Synagro or some other facility? So it's all the economics. That's why I wanted to credit the city. When you start thinking about anaerobic digestion and thinking about the biosolids energy, you're thinking outside the box. You're thinking ahead of other communities, and not everybody's doing that. And I can tell you, as a former municipal official, I'm very impressed by what has been done in Fitchburg to date. And I say that sincerely. I was a city attorney for a couple of cities for many, many mayors and years, and I give it credit to what you folks are doing here. It's very forward-thinking, and in the industry, I like to see that. So yeah, absolutely. Your radius will be determined by your cost. Your cost is improved by the fact that you're not doing a co-composting facility. You want to deal with fuels to waste to fuels or waste to energy.
So we theoretically have an idea, and we could always structure the facility such that we could expand as need and demand expands.
Exactly. And industry will do those equations for you. They'll know what their service area is based on their tip fee. They'll know based on their cost that they can expect to pull from this area, and they'll be talking to the haulers to divert waste here instead of other long haul alternatives.
How many other facilities like we might be proposing exist within our state or regional area that might be transporting solids?
I wish I had the answer for that. I don't. I know that Deer Island has digesters, but I don't know that they're bringing in source-separated organics or sludge residuals from other treatment plants. We mentioned GLSD. At the time that we had put out the final feasibility study, they had not yet done an upgrade of their facility, where now they have the capability of digesting more than just their biosolids. They have the capability of bringing in some biosolids from the outside, and I believe they have contract arrangements for pre-processing and so forth and quality control. I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'd have to look into it and get back to you.
Okay. When we put out the request for expressions of interest, is this like a survey of sorts to different companies, different private industry, as to what kind of arrangements they might be interested in?
It's a procurement process, and we would be working with the chief procurement officer to put this out. It's similar to either an RFP or a solicitation for bids. If we were to have a construction project designed and ready to go out to bid, it's different laws, but it's still procurement laws. It's still a solicitation to the greater public that there is a prospective project that we're soliciting input on and interest in.
So, and it's different from a request for proposals in that, in a request for proposals, we actually have a plan, and in a request for expressions of interest, we're asking them for them to give us a plan.
Right, to comment on their interest in the project, to describe their process, to describe their company, describe their approach to your problem, and to describe their preferences on such things as finance, ownership, delivery model, which is design, build, own, design, bid, build, and those items. And then your RFP becomes your pricing document. It essentially gives you your, what is this going to cost? What are we going to see for costs and revenue share and schedule? Some technologies may take longer to schedule, to permit than others. If you have an AD facility, they've already been permitted in some places in Massachusetts, as opposed to someone who comes in with a process such as gasification or pyrolysis. They're commercially demonstrated technologies. Have they been permitted in Massachusetts? In one case, somebody comes in with supercritical water oxidation, not been permitted in Massachusetts. And you look at, you consider that as well as price. What? It's going to take me 8 years to get to this one and 3 years to get to that one. Those are factors you consider.
In your experience in putting out these requests for expressions of interest in this particular area, are there a lot of interests that return? You know, sometimes we put out bids and we get very few interest. How do we put that out there to the industry to ensure that we have a few proposals to determine, to figure out which direction we want to go?
When Fall River was faced with the same situation, multiple hearth incinerator going out of Wagon 14 and needing to replace the biosolids process, the RFEI went out and there were 12 responses internationally. You know, some international companies, some regional companies, some things as simple as hauling the sludge to one of their other plants, some things as complex as, you know, pyrolysis gasification. So I would expect that you would get a number. And right now the organics industry, I think, is thriving and looking for places to construct. So I can't guarantee that you'll get some, but I know we've been talking this project up out in our circles. I was in New York yesterday working on a large waste energy project that has a biosolids component, and I was talking this up to people in the industry, and they're all, make sure we get the RFEI when it goes out. We want to see it. And I have some names and addresses to give to Jeff so that when you mail out the RFEI, what we do in this industry is central register is your publication required, as Mary knows, local newspaper, industry trade magazines, but we know who all the players are in the industry and make sure they get a personal copy. And if they don't respond, sometimes you make the follow-up call and say, did you get it? Why aren't you in here? So yeah, we try to generate a lot of interest in the industry, and I've seen with this project that there is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it feels like our West Fitchburg treatment facility would be the perfect use for anaerobic digestions, but I don't really know exactly. So would we be able to reuse any of the existing infrastructure that we have there, or would it be demolishing a lot of existing infrastructure? What would that kind of look like?
Well, the control building has a lot of unused tankage within it that could be removed and repurposed. There are outside tanks that used to receive wastewater or used to settle sludge from the old treatment process. Those could be repurposed. We do still have to take into consideration that there is still some wastewater flow that comes to this property, and as a part of the process, we would either have to negotiate with the selected entity to divert that flow away from it if they couldn't work alongside of it, or to make accommodations so that that need is still being fulfilled. Wastewater does still come to it. It's much diminished than it was before. It was all tied to the former booming paper industry that is no longer a booming paper industry in Fitchburg anymore. That's what drove the closure of the plant in the first place and transferring it to pumping station status.
And so, timeline possible of this facility, putting it out to bid, putting it up for expression of interest, putting it up for request for proposal, getting a bid, construction, potential time frame of when this could occur, because our landfill closes in 2024, potentially. Could it be any time around that time frame? 4 years?
I'd say this procurement process that we've just described, about 18 months to get a notice of contract award and negotiations completed. I would Does that timeframe sound reasonable? What you
That
guys
sounds
do?
approximately correct.
Yeah, about, and that's for the,
RFEI, RFP,
and contract award, yep, negotiations, about 18 months. And then, once we get the proposals in, and say in the fall or spring, you'll have an idea of what the development schedule would be for a project. So an AD project of this nature could be with the state, your state process, your MEPA process, and permitting, probably, I would say, a 2 to 3 year process, I would think.
after
This-
18 months?
Yes, the state favors, as you know, anaerobic digestion, you're a fan of anaerobic digestion. The state favors anaerobic digestion for this type of process, for biosolids, for food waste. That's not gonna stop some of the other commercially developed technologies like gasification or other things from proposing. And if they're more economical and permittable, then that can be around the same time frame. One of the things Jeff and I talked about is to not necessarily fast-track permitting, but to facilitate permitting, is to have early meetings with the regulatory officials locally. On a solid waste project I'm doing down in Taunton over the last couple of years, what we did is we began meeting with regulatory officials before we put the project out to bid, so we knew what the comfort level was for certain type of technologies. And I actually got a letter out of the DEP Boston office, signed off by the regional office, that these are the technologies that are permissible for post-recycled municipal solid waste. And we can try to facilitate the same process with this. It's like a permitting review that helps facilitate it. And one of the things you always want to do early on, and we'll do this in the RFP process, is what we call fatal flaw analysis. We'll look at the proposals that come in the RFEI and say that technology will never make it on this site or in this Commonwealth, so that one we don't have to worry about. And that's called fatal flaw analysis. We apply the site assignment criteria, the permitting criteria, and say, nope. And you know, that's how we help you weed out the wheat, separate the wheat from the chaff, I think is the biblical term.
Well, it sounds like we have the right company assisting us. Another thing when it comes to the area that we have available at the West Treatment Plant, compared to other facilities like the Lawrence District or other facilities of our like size, do we have, what would you say that we could handle regionally or, in terms of physical area to construct anaerobic digestion, handle trucks, handle everything?
Footprint is one of the things that'll be included in the RFEI for the industry to comment on. So you'll have an opportunity for gasification facility with this many trucks per day. We'll tell you whether your site's adequate or not. They'll comment on how much of the footprint they'll use and need. And as Jeff said, you need to reserve some of it for your own purposes, correct?
Correct.
For the
We
wastewater,
have
so-
had interest from the time that we commenced this process. Word gets out on the street that Fitchburg has some interest in pursuing a project similar to this. So I have had phone calls through the years, and we have had prospective developers of these types of technology come out and take a look at the site, and no one's tipped their hand to say that this is a prohibitive site space-wise. So beyond that, it's a little bit difficult to tell without getting into the deeper into the process than we currently are.
So we're talking a lot about sludge for the use of the facility and creating the fuel or digestion. What other kind of items would we be able to bring to this facility? Would it be something like yard waste or municipal composting at that kind of level of food waste?
It depends on the technology. Anaerobic digestion can be a little bit of a sensitive process, and it needs some quality control on the organic substrate that's coming in. It can use source-separated organics, which is food waste that are that don't have contaminants, plastic spoons, plastic bags, types of things within the media that's coming in. Fats, oils, and grease is another potential substrate that could feed into the process.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Walsh.
Actually, my question dealt with the timeline, and I think Attorney Torres has addressed that to my satisfaction, so thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Counselor Boishman.
Quick questions. First of all, you want to say thank you. You got to thank that guy right there, because he's the one that put everything in motion. We just sat here and listened, and we went to the demonstrations, and we went down to Lawrence. But I do have a question. Lawrence facility, is that private or public?
It's a regional facility that, it's first and foremost, it's a regional wastewater treatment facility. It was created by state legislation, I believe, because it's a regional facility. The organic, I don't know the business operation and how they're bringing in outside organics. I think they have a contract with one of the larger haulers. It may be Waste Management, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay. Now, I know you and I talked, and I think you said in front of the councils numerous times, you really don't want to be involved in that much. You don't want to run the operation. You already said, you made it very clear to me. And I always thought, geez, what a gold mine we would have. We're producing electricity, we'll have gas, we can supply some of the places up the street with power, even supply our own place and still make money at a profit. Why wouldn't you want to if we can make money with this kind of thing? If you're saying that the vicinity is going to need a place like this, and we can make money, and the money that we make, we can reinvest it into the thing, why wouldn't you want to?
Well, I think you're focusing on all the positives and turning blind eyes to all the negatives. For this to be a success, it needs to be managed as a business, and as municipal officials, we don't often conduct ourselves and our operations as a business. I don't compete against fellow wastewater treatment plants or collection systems to take Fitchburg's wastewater. I've got a monopoly on that. So we don't do things in a way that's akin to how the private business sector works, and that's managing contracts to bring these organics to the facility, managing contracts for off-taking the either gas or electricity. And it's also a special process. If we're anaerobic digestion, it's very different from what we do as a treatment process at the East Plant. Very different. So we don't have that expertise to be doing that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things to be concerned about, and we had always preferred for a number of reasons, a public-private partnership or a long-term lease arrangement or something along those lines.
All right, that's all the questions I have. Do more when you come back in front of us. I'll do more research.
I know you will.
Councilor Giannatalli.
I know it's been stated that we were early on in this process, but there's been no discussion or talk about a P&L, profit and loss, a potential.
There was, in the feasibility study, there was some economic analysis that was done, and it was based on certain volumes of feedstock in and certain price points for the sale of electricity out that were probably based on 2016's tariffs.
Okay,
So I think there was some, and at that point, the Weston and Sampson made a determination that it was economically viable to do the project. And that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in the RFEI, getting some general cost estimates from folks.
So to cut through the weeds, my focus is making money on this. I understand we have to think like a business. We don't want to price ourselves out of the market. But to me, if all it's going to do is cover our costs, we don't get any extra, I don't see the point in doing it. I see no benefit. We need to make money in this effort. You've talked very extensively about how this is a unique situation where not many places have this ability. We need to seize on it. And whether that profit goes into the wastewater enterprise fund, which I think it should go, or not is a subject for another time. But the reason why, for me, it's so sensitive about making a net income on this is, I'm sure you're well aware of our history here of the sewer separation project.
CSO, yeah.
And how our residents have been hit very hard on the sewer portion of their bill because of this unfunded mandate. So this whole system that we're hoping to implement sounds wonderful. But if it doesn't do anything to benefit them in the long run, then I don't really care about it. You know? I mean, we can sit here and talk about the ecological benefits and the environment. You know, part of me is going, la, 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 la. I want to know what it's going to give to the city's bottom line so we can give these people a break. Because the federal government already thinks that our citizens are wealthy. So if we can make money on this, for me, it's not a question of if. It has to make money, or else I don't see the point. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I applaud your efforts, and I'm very excited to going forward, but I'm really focused on the financials. And I certainly do not want us running it. It's got to be private, because we don't need any more OPEB and pension for another 25 employees or whatever it's going to cost. So if it's budget neutral, not interested. It has to be a moneymaker, and it has to go back into that department, and it has to go towards rate relief. Or a reinvestment back into the business so our residents don't get an increase in their rate to fund a reinvestment back into the business. One way or the other, it's got to benefit the ratepayer, because right now, they're not flush with cash. And the constituents that have asked me about this, that's all they ask me. Is it going to make money for the city? How does it impact my wallet? And I agree with them. They don't care about anything else. So I just want to put that in your mindset as you move forward with this process, that I, for myself, am going to be very, very closely following what the P&L looks like for when we get these RFPs. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Jeff Marbury.
Thank you.
Councilors, I apologize. I skipped over the Committee on Records report. Councilor Squalia?
We have reviewed the records, and they appear to be in order.
Unless there's any objection, we'll accept the report from the Committee on Records. All right. Thank you, councilors. Next, we have a 05820 annual report, Fitchburg Fire Department for the year 2019. Unless there are objections, we'll waive the reading and place that on file in the city clerk's office. Unless we have a couple hours, I'm happy to read it through. It's long. Next, City Property Committees, plural reports. Councilor Zarella.
If there's no objection, I'll treat it as a single meeting because we didn't take up any new items in the second meeting. We took up a total of 6 items. There are 4 listed here. For open meeting law purposes, I will note that the other 2 are listed under other committees on the agenda, so they are properly noticed as council business for the evening. First was 0520, an order that whereas on March 13th, 1995, the city of Fitchburg entered into an agreement with this town of Westminster, whereby the city agreed to accept and treat the wastewater from the town as outlined in the enclosed order. Basically a renewal and an extension of the existing wastewater agreement with Westminster in order to facilitate further negotiations of a new agreement. That was unanimously approved. 2620 N.M. Cervantes, Treasurer, to declare 35 Davis Street parcel 1959-0 as excess property and designate side yard sales. That was unanimously approved. 41 and 4220, those are the lease and host agreement for AKS Recycling, currently operating partly on city property and partly on airport property. Those were unanimously held to the 17th because we don't have final documents on those yet. We have 04520, Councilors Michael Kushmerek and Amy Green and residents Joseph and Linda Byrne to name the junction of Main Street and North Street Jerry Martell Square. That was unanimously approved. I note that it was also before the planning board, and that's later on the agenda. And then 4620, Councilors Marisa Fleming and Marcus DiNatale to declare Ethier Street a public way. That was unanimously held in deference to the Public Works Committee, which has requested that it be held.
Move to accept the report?
Second.
I have a motion and second to accept the City Property Committee report. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. Finance Committee report, Councilor DiNatale.
Thank you. 5120, order there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $600,000 to be taken out of the Water Enterprise Retained Earnings Fund and credited to the capital expenditures inline turbine and pump line item. for the purpose of installing an inline turbine at the Narrows Road pressure reducing valve station and a 3 MGD pump at the Marshall Regulating Plant. That was adopted unanimously. 52-20, was an order to transfer from within the building department $10,100 credited to personal services for custodial staff. This was to replace the private contractor we had cleaning the facility at 166 Boulder Drive and bringing on a part-time employee for the remainder of the fiscal year who is not getting benefits, which was brought up at the committee meeting, so I just wanted to highlight that. 5320 was an order for $282,500 to be charged against free cash and credited to the DPW department for equipment for buying a brand-new sweeper and 2 utility pickup trucks. That was adopted unanimously. 5420 was a free cash order for $5,000 to be credited to the library for building maintenance to repair 2 matters involving above the auditorium and some piping in the basement. And 5520 and 5720 were, one was an order and one was an ordinance. The order was to appropriate $30,000 from available funds to cover the balance of fiscal year 2020 to fund a new position known as the Director of Facilities, and the ordinance was piggybacking off of that to actually put this position in the city code to make it legal. And 5520 and 5720 were adopted by the committee 4-1.
Mr. President, I'd like to pull 55 and 57, please.
Are you making a motion that you'd like to accept everything except for 55 and 57?
Yes, I'd like to discuss 55 and 57, please.
Second.
I have a motion and second to accept 051 up to and including 05420. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous.
Move to approve 5520 and 5720.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve 55 and 5720. Speaking on the motion,
On the motion,
Counselor Boishman.
Mr. President, and members of the council, I'd like to talk to you. A lot of you councilors on this committee right now are half my age. And I'm going to tell you a little brief story about why I'm totally against this position. I think it's bureaucracy at its best. Now, I'm going to give you a brief history and a brief scenario why we shouldn't have it. Many years ago, we were told, the council across the aisle talked about it to the man that just sat at that table. We were mandated by the government to start this project of wastewater treatment. We sat around and we let it go down the road and we kicked the can. And now we're paying high wages because of that reason. The MS4, back in the 90s and in the year 2000, we got fined $10,000. Why? Because we did not implement what they wanted. So we got fined for that project. The Lonzo School, we talked about the roof. I came on this council in 2013. We knew about the Lonzo School before that, and we did nothing. Our problem. Rango Elementary School, the water main froze. The coldest days of the year that year. We were 100 years and we had that problem. Nobody would have known that it was leaking. But the main is getting get cold air, so they had to go back down there. After we found out it was going to freeze, they had to insulate so we wouldn't have that problem again. Our problem. Crocker Elementary School. Same year, same problem, the coldest time of the year. What do? We tell all the employees from first and second, come to day shift. Don't send anybody in there. We've been told from the weathermen, this coldest time of the year. This is the coldest winter we ever had. What do? 4 days, nobody goes up there, we have a flood, the school is closed down. Our fault. Our fault. Fitchburg High School, we had that fire up there, the smoke damage. Our fault. The mold problem, we didn't put those vents on to keep the room cool in the summertime. Our fault. And we're going to need a facilitator. Let me tell you something. I was sitting in front of my TV, my computer the other day, and I was looking at cars, and I seen a sports car. My dream is to have a sports car. And I saw the sports car that I like. And I closed my eyes, and I sat there. and I was dreaming about my wife and I driving down Route 2.
Counselor Boishman, do you have a point?
I got a point. It's leading to this. Because everything we want to do is a wish list. And we're no different than anybody. You're no different than me or you. If the roofing guy comes up and you say you got a leak, gee, can you patch it? I recommend that you really get a new roof, but patch it. Well, we get that year out of it, and we go that year out of it. Oh, actually, can you patch it? And they got that year. We don't do it. We don't have the money. We're not investing in this. Councilor D'Antelli already said it. We don't want OPEC. We don't want to hire more employees. Right across the aisle, he said it tonight, just a little while ago. I'm totally against it. You want to put somebody in there? Put a man that's a handyman person that can fix the door, fix the light, run an extension cord, put a plug in, solder a pipe. That's what you need. But to make a wish list, like I'm going to wait for my car, my dream car, a dream list, and you're going to pay the guy $90,000 plus, and you're telling me we need it? And it's funny. I sit here year after year, month after month, and I get told, we don't have the money. We don't have the money, Paul. We can't hire more DPW. We don't have the money. We don't have it. God, we found it. We found $150,000, didn't we? Very easy. I'm asking you for your support. Look at it. We don't need it. We get people in the position already can do the jobs. Why do you want to hire somebody to make more bureaucracy? And I ask you, these same people that are doing this work now, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Oh, I know. We get so much work. We're overabundant. They're doing too much. There's too much work for them. Come on. Wake up. Get into the private life. This is not government. It's at its best. More bureaucracy than I ever saw in my life. And I'm paying. And you're paying. And I don't want to pay unless we become very efficient. And then the other thing I want to say, if we do hire, then we better start looking at a 457 plan. It's called retirement, so we can get out of the pension fund and we give some money to them. And they handle their own money into a 401k, and we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Counselor.
This is going on there. He talked about OPEC.
Privatization of pensions is not before us. The floor is yours.
Well, so anyway, that's how I feel. And I'm telling you, we're making a big mistake if we spend this kind of money for a guy that's going to do one job. And plus that, I knew I read this right, he's going to oversee everybody. So the guy that works at Fitchburg High School or the public schools, what's he going to do? This is his job to do that. It's his job to do that, to check the buildings. What's he going to do? He's going to report to him. So he's going to report to him, and he's going to come back and report to him. And I didn't get a dictatorship to say, you should have had a guy there Christmas week to make sure that the water pipe won't break. Nobody's going to know. My furnace broke down. You think he's going to know that because the thermal coupling broke? He ain't going to know that when it's going to break. Or my circulator pump broke because there's no heat in the apartment. Or because the guy left the window open and the pipe froze. That really happened to me, and I went down there, and there's water all over the place because the window was left open. This maintainer, this guy's going to be able to tell all that? Come on, you don't know when there's a problem? They're making 90 to 100,000 plus, and they don't know we have a problem? And you're telling me all this stuff they're going to do? You don't know when your brakes are leaving on your car, your brakes are not working? You don't know when to change your oil? We're making a big mistake. Why do you want to put more bureaucracy? You want to hire people? Put it where it'll do the best. Give it to the DPW. They need more people. We can't get things done. We can't get our sidewalks. We can't get the roads patched right. We can't get things done. But you want to put one guy in charge, pay him over $100,000 a year, and say we need him to write down paperwork and to dictate, say, hey, Council President, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to do that. Really? Really? What's wrong with the people we have in charge already to say, you got to do this, and if you don't like it, we're going to write you up. So that's the way I feel about it, and I will not support this. I think it's a waste of time, and it's more bureaucracy, and I'm going to say to you, this is wrong, and you ought to check with your constituents because they feel the same way as I do. They don't want it. So it's more time, more money wasted.
Councilor Zarella.
So I agree. We've kicked a lot of issues down the road. That's the whole point of this position. Because we don't have anyone doing this right now. This is not a person to walk through the buildings and make a punch list of, the lights out, the walls cracked. That's not what this person is there for. We have no one doing what this person is going to be hired for. And that's the problem. We have no one whose job and expertise it is to be aware of everything that needs to be done at a high level, not a micro level, not a repaint this part of the wall level. We have no one who's looking at all our facilities and keeping tabs on what needs to be done to keep us from getting into a hole like we've gotten into. We have so many facilities, including City Hall, that would not have cost us half as much money, not a tenth as much money, if someone had been not only keeping an eye on what was needed, but also making a long-range plan for what was needed. Someone to say, okay, you know what? No, we don't have money to replace the roof right now. We're going to have to patch it. But we know that we can't keep patching the roof for more than 3 years. So let's figure out how we're going to get enough money in 3 more years, because otherwise we're not going to have a roof. Or a roof truss, as the case may be. And again, I agree also, the frozen pipes issue, yeah, there were things we could have done to prevent that from happening. There was no one whose job it was to proactively identify potential problems and put processes in place to deal with them. That was no one's job. You can't assign that to the maintenance people at the building. Their job isn't to think long-term about, okay, well, if this happens, what do we do? If that happens, what do we do? They're not planners. I'm not saying they're not intelligent. I'm saying that's not their job. It's not their training. It's not what we pay them for. They're paid to identify a current problem and fix it, to tighten the pipes, to slap paint on a wall. That's a job that needs doing. I'm not at all detracting from them. But we don't pay them to look at a building and say, okay, if this scenario happens, what systems will we need to have in place to keep it from being a catastrophe? It's not their job. If we had someone whose job that was, to say, okay, you know what, we have old pipes, old boiler systems, let's make sure we have someone checking in every however many hours on a protocol, doing a walkthrough however many hours when the building is vacant, then yeah, someone could have caught that when the pipes initially burst rather than much later after a lot more damage had been done. But we didn't have anyone looking at that. That's no one's fault in the current city administration. It's not the mayor's fault. He's not a facilities maintenance expert. It's not the school maintenance people's fault. That's not their job. Arguably, I know nothing about the person who's currently in charge of facilities maintenance at the schools. I don't know if it's his job. Maybe it is. But if it were a municipal building instead of a school building, it would have been no one's job. This is one person. One person is not going to be an unmanageable hit to our pension burdens and benefits burdens and so forth. This isn't like hiring 5, 10, 15 more people to staff a department. And this is not a handyman, nor someone who's making a wish list. This is not someone who's going to be fixing things directly, but it's also not someone who's just going to be setting up, okay, we need to do these things. Okay, Mr. Mayor, here's your list of things we need to do. Figure it out. This is someone who is a manager, not just of people, but of systems, of projects, of priorities. This is someone who will say, we need to find X number of dollars in the budget within the next Y number of years in order to fix these problems. Here's the cost if we defer it. Here's the cost if we allow it to fail. Here's a recommended maintenance schedule to get the most years of life out of our systems. This is also someone who will manage all the projects themselves. If we have a capital project, this person will be overseeing them. This is also a person whose job it will be to coordinate all the different people in the different buildings, in the different departments, because, again, we don't have anyone who has eyes on everything. We have this person who's looking at this piece and that person who's looking at that piece, and half the people we have looking at it, they're doing stuff that they're not getting paid for. Our building commissioner, the building commissioner is the one that came off at finance, so that's the one I remember. But it's not his job to advise us on facilities maintenance. He does so because he knows building codes and because we need someone doing it. But that's not his job. His job is to enforce building codes and zoning codes. We need to consolidate this under someone who's actually being paid to do this job, because technically, most of the people who are doing it now could refuse to do it if they wanted to. It's not in their job description. B, we need someone who's looking at everything, who sees the big picture. And C, we need someone who knows the different pieces, not just maintenance, not just finance, not just emergency planning. We need someone who knows all of those areas, and that's what this person will be, so that we don't have to have the person who knows maintenance setting up a meeting with the person who knows how to finance the maintenance, setting up a meeting with the person who knows how to do disaster preparedness. Ruling by committee doesn't work. You can't run a department by committee. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it's ineffective. There has to be one person who has the final say. That's also why he'll be overseeing the school facilities maintenance. Not because that person will not be doing their current job responsibilities, but because ultimately there needs to be one person who has a say over all of it in case there's a disagreement. If we had two separate people and the school person said we need to do these things and the municipal person said we need to do those things, we need someone who can make a final call on it with knowledge of those subject matter areas. Because again, it's all well and good to say, well, that's the mayor's job, but we have a very effective mayor, but he's not trained in facilities maintenance and things like that. Why do we want to dump that on his lap and say, here, make a decision with no training in this? As opposed to having an advisor who can say, I've looked at all these details, and this is what we should do. So I don't like spending money. I don't like bureaucracy. But this is going to save us far more money down the road than we're going to spend on it. To the tune of potentially, if we had this 5-10 years ago, that's $23.5 million we might still have in bonding capacity and whatnot, because we'd still be in a functional city hall that never failed in the first place.
Councilor Giannatalli.
We have two bites at the apple, right? So here's my first one. When I entered the Finance Committee meeting last week, I was on the fence because I was concerned that this would be a duplicative effort. And when you read the job description, and it's a draft, so there's going to be changes. I talked to the mayor, I talked to Ms. Davis, there's going to be changes to this. This is not the final product. One of the things they emphasized from the start was that this person is not going to be involving themselves primarily with the schools. 3/4 of their time is going to be spent on the other 16 municipal buildings we own, not counting the 8 school buildings that we own. There's 24 facilities. 2/3 of those facilities are city-owned, 8 of them are school-owned. This person is going to spend probably 1/4 of their time assisting the schools because the school department has agreed to pay the city through the indirect charges every year 25% of this person's salary. If you read the job description in its draft form, nobody in the city has this job description. I'm going to read a couple of highlights for everybody. Develop and maintain a multi-year capital improvement plan and maintenance program for all city buildings, oversees execution of approved projects, and implements a system to prioritize maintenance projects. Develop data regarding building maintenance costs, energy utilization, and more to facilitate informed budgeting and decision-making related to operations. Prepare, draft, and administer the approved budget for facility maintenance, safety, and security, including supplies. Supervise and assist with the preparation, management, and tracking of operating, maintenance, capital improvement, capital expenditure plans, and budgets relating to the department, including all utility line items. And conduct a comprehensive and detailed cost analysis program of facility expenditures as a basis for annual forecast of expenditures. The job description continues on to say that this person is going to be involved with project management. It was stated at the committee meeting that right now we have to hire a project manager every time there's a project over $1.5 million because that's state law. With this person, that would defray some of the costs of some of these projects. They wouldn't be doing everything, but they'd take the plate off of a private contractor to do that and up the price on the bid. They will also be in charge of personnel management, and it was stated at the committee meeting that they are not in charge of all the school building maintenance and custodial staff. They will be in charge of a few select maintenance/custodian people that are going to be heavily involved with the new City Hall facility. So if you read the job description, and I can go on, there's other things this person's going to do, you will know very quickly this is not a duplicative job. Second is the insurance companies. It's been stated multiple times that we have not been good stewards of our buildings, and I agree with that. I think the public and everybody in this room would agree that we're not good stewards of our facilities. And I've heard some counselors in this room, and I've heard members of the public, justifiably so, attack the city in general because we're not proactive, we're reactive, we don't plan ahead. That's what this position's aiming to do. So my question to my colleagues who are against this is, what's your solution? What's your alternative? The status quo? I think we all know how the status quo is gone, and it's not because people aren't doing their jobs. There was a comment made about the pipes freezing. I just want to say one thing about that. That was a state and regional problem. There were multiple districts throughout the Commonwealth and outside the Commonwealth that had pipe bursts. We had one of the coldest winters on record that year, sustained below zero temperatures. I want to put that in context. It was also talked about the roof. No one is saying in this job description, nor should anyone have any inclination that this person is like some angelic figure who's going to correct all of the ills in our buildings. I want to get that out there right now. I certainly don't feel that way. But we have nobody right now in the city, nor have we ever, dedicated 100% of their time to this kind of work. Now, I hear about bureaucracy. I've worked for 3 private sector companies in my career. Every single one of them has this kind of a position at their place. This exact position is in the private sector. This is not some bureaucratic department we're creating and we're staffing it with 15 pencil pushers, okay? This is one person. And on the bureaucracy note, the average employment we've increased in this city in 5 years, 1 person per year. There were 3 out of the 5 fiscal years we didn't hire anybody. 2 of those 5 fiscal years we hired up to 5 people. Police, DPW, and 1 administrative employee in the HR department. This is the 2nd administrative position we're adding in 7 years. So I want the public to understand we're not spend happy. There have been many years we haven't added any bodies. Again, context, folks, matters. I keep getting words thrown at me for my OPEB and pension comments. First of all, no one would know what OPEB was unless I talked about it 10 years ago. Second of all, pension, I'm glad everybody's coming around to the pension. I bring those problems up because I want the public to know where their tax increase every year goes. The pension and OPEB liabilities are already accrued. They're done. They're not going down unless you lay off every single person in this city. So everyone needs to stop using that as the boogeyman for why we should never hire anybody. And I've never said that. I said in the last presentation, if we're going to hire 25 people, that has an impact, not 1 person. And on that note, from the financial perspective, and this is the first thing I look at, it's budget neutral. The money we're spending on 166 Boulder Drive is going away. It's being diverted to 718 Main Street. Less than half of that diversion is covering this job. There is no impact to the operating budget. Another fact in context. So when you read this description and the facts I just laid out, I became convinced this position is necessary. Because I asked myself, if I'm going to vote against this, what is my solution? There are politicians, there are residents who are so quick and eager to attack regarding the city's faults. It was mentioned about Long's Joe roof. We knew the problems years before we replaced it. Why didn't it get replaced years before we replaced it? Because we were still paying off the high school and the fire station. We had no excess capacity to borrow. Does anybody think it's a coincidence that right after we paid those off, we took the loan out for Long's Joe roof? It's not a coincidence. It's because we didn't have the loan capacity. So this person's going to do what they're going to do. You're right. The funding is a big part of this. He or she is going to find minor issues, is going to prevent minor issues from becoming bigger issues. But the big issues that come up, if we get price tags and we can't pay for it, okay, fine. That's not this person's fault. That's not what their job says. You're supposed to find the magic money tree. They're supposed to identify issues before they happen and stay on top of routine preventative maintenance. So I wanted to put that in context. And there's a lot of talk about the schools. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this position is not going to spend most of their time on the schools. And I've said in the committee meeting, if he or she is, then the school department has to pony up more money for him or her. Okay? And so this position's been talked about since 2008. Former Mayor Wong was gung-ho for this position. Mayor DiNatalia was gung-ho for this position. It was all about the timing. And this is where the consideration of the financial impact comes into play. Again, it's not a coincidence. Why is this position being proposed? Because it's happening at a time where it's not going to add money to the budget. And we're going to have this person focus on the new city hall so we don't have a repeat. Now, it was stated earlier, and when you get 4 or 5 people who complain about something, some people like to say that the public says they're against it. They don't show it in how they vote. They don't show it in coming to a meeting. Do you see anybody here tonight voicing opposition to it? No. The majority of people who've contacted me want this for the reasons I just stated. No impact to the budget. And one woman said to me yesterday, well, if you vote against this, council, then why does everybody keep complaining that we're not doing anything to address this problem, and you guys aren't going to have someone dedicated to this? This is a never-before-used position in this city. This is not a bureaucratic position. This isn't a position already in the works where we're going to add 5 people to it. Oh, it's not working out, so we'll add bodies. That, to me, is where the bureaucracy argument comes to. Okay? So again, what's the solution? Last point I'll make is, because of all these problems we've had in our facilities, the insurance companies basically threw the white flag. All right? We had a massive increase in our premium last year in the budget because the insurance companies had it with us because of the problems we were sending them in claims for. So our deductible went from $50,000 to $1 million. And our premium went up. Now, the insurance companies told the city, one way to get back on our good graces and lower that deductible and lower that premium is to hire someone like this, like the private sector does, to get on top of these things before they happen. Now, there's a savings right there. If this person does what he or she is supposed to do, it'll pay for their position in a half a year. Because I think we have a lot more problems on the horizon than $100,000. And so that's my thought process on this whole thing. I sound irritated and frustrated because people are so quick to attack and say, we didn't do this and we didn't do that. No one has the magic tree that grows the money. Because it's easy to complain, it's not easy to find the solution. So that's where I come down on this. And This is a proactive approach that we are undertaking, and I became convinced of it after the testimony and after reading this. You can't read this job description and come out and say it's duplicative. Not possible. Or else I'd love to see somebody step forward and tell me they're doing every single thing on this list. Okay? And if they are, we're really getting a bargain out of them. So, that's it. I reserve my right to speak again after I hear more people talk, but I want things put in proper context, folks. Okay? Please. Thank you.
Counselor Van Housinga.
It is exorbitantly expensive to replace our municipal buildings. City Hall is costing us $23.5 million. The replacement of Crocker School costs us $60 million. The library, I don't even have that number, is it $20, $30 million? $39 million. So, you know what, we have to make do with what we have. We have to be smart with how we manage them to make sure they last as long as possible. And part of that is having someone organizing a long-term plan for the operation and maintenance of our buildings. And if we don't have this long-term system in place to make sure that they last as long as possible, it's fiscally irresponsible. I feel like I should talk a lot longer and wave some paper around, but that's my point, and I'll leave it at that.
Your brevity is appreciated. Thank you, Counselor Van Housinga. Counselor Green.
Geez, I hope I can maintain that. I would like to address that at one point, I was very familiar with how the school buildings were being maintained, and at that same point, not maintained. So if you think that it would be easy after you get the alarm call at 1:10 a.m. in the morning for a spouse to head up to the high school because there's burst pipes and there's 300 gallons of water flowing into a building, and that there's no easy way to alleviate that, I would have welcomed your help at that point to offer any assistance to anyone who was involved in that. And to that, there were many a nights after those pipes burst that I was spouseless because my husband had fire watch duty, because at that point there was no fire suppression system at that high school, and it was imperative that if something else went wrong, that there was personnel there that would correct anything else that may happen. That was not the fault of any one person. That was not the fault of any one system. That was weather related. We live on the East Coast, and when we put up buildings, I don't know why people, I mean, we all live in our own homes, and it's our due diligence that every year we put money into maintenance of our homes to ensure their longevity. So you can't expect a building to last forever. Everything has a lifespan. It is critical that when we are presented with an opportunity to make changes for the good, that we jump on that. I mean, reading over that job description for whoever that person is going to be, God bless them if they adhere to that job description, because I happen to think that $100,000, we would be getting a bargain for anybody that would have that amount of expertise and that fortitude to take on that job description to do that. My second point that I will speak directly from is being a member of the Council on Aging. I have witnessed many instances where our executive director, Joan Goodwin, has had to be the maintenance supervisor, the general contractor, the overseer of some of these large improvements that have had to take place at the senior center, the Armory, O'Neill Hall, that building. And she is by no means, she is more than capable, but her area of expertise is not on general contractor jobs that require, clean air mitigation, mold mitigation, a sump pump issue, an issue with exterior doors, an issue with the condenser unit up on the roof. So if nothing else comes out of this, then the opportunity where we can say to Joan Goodwin, we are taking that off the list of things that you're going to have to be responsible for moving forward. I am more than happy to fund this position. I am pleased to see where in some of the wording we have requested that we get I guess an overview or a brief on what the school director of maintenance has before us, and then what this new appointee will have before us, so that whatever is found can go on the capital improvements list, so that we're at least all aware of it, so that when there's appropriation of money available, we can say, oh, our priority is that we're going to fix this, this, and this, and that we've got the funds to do it. So I would like to say that I'm not afraid to spend this money for this position, because we always have the ability that if it's not working out, we just don't fund the position. I can't see where we would never not fund this position with the extent of where we are now with our buildings, but I look forward to bringing this person on board, and I hope to God we don't scare them off. Thank you.
Counselor Squalia.
Thank you. This position seems like a dream position. It seems like a magical dream of this person's going to handle everything in the city that everyone else is currently doing, but they're not qualified. It seems absolutely an astronomical task, as many counselors have noted. God bless them. They're going to be. We're going to be getting a bargain. I heard that a few times. And yeah, at $90,000 to $100,000, this person who can handle all buildings and structures in the city seems like a real bargain, because it probably won't be able to happen. I don't trust it. There's no way that one person can handle all of these facilities in the city. We're going to hire this one person. If that person can even come close to any of the claims that have been thrown out at the Finance Committee and or tonight, I would be shocked. I would be shocked. I would like to see something more like Councillor Boschman's general sentiment. I agree with. This position seems way too grandiose of what we're putting on this person to be able to ever accomplish that task. Whereas I'd like to see it structured something like an engineering studies of the facilities and the buildings. Imagine how many engineering studies of the buildings that we could get for $100,000 a year plus benefits, sent forth to a commission, like we have many commissions in the city run by, that are appointed experts in these kind of fields, like our Capital Improvement Commission. We could use a Capital Improvement Commission in this similar capacity, submitting engineering reports to determine course of action of how to spend our money. I don't see this working out. And to that point, if the position doesn't work out, we can always cut the position. We all know that that's never going to happen. We're never going to cut this position. That's never going to happen. And when it comes to being budget neutral, that is also quite the magical numbers that we have there. We consider taking out all the rent that we pay for the current city hall, and we don't consider at all any of the funds that we're using to service the $23.5 million new city hall. That's in a completely different budget. We're just supplementing this other budget. So, I will not vote for these positions for those reasons. Thank you.
Counselor Schultz.
I've heard the arguments on both sides, and Councilor Di Natale makes a great point. What's the plan if we don't do this? What we're doing now is not working, obviously. Look at the problems we've had over the years in this city. And like Councilor Di Natale, I've been in the private industry. It's crazy that we don't have this position. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I'll be voting for this position and hope that some of my fellow councilors will join me in supporting this.
I'll add, I think even if you refuse to accept the premise of the budget neutrality, which I don't, I agree, but even if you take and put that aside, and even if you put aside the fact that this position could save money through synergy with the schools and coupling of contracts and awarding of bids in conjunction with our procurement office, and even if you refuse to believe that we'll save money through having better fulfillment of our contracts, that we'll have an onus project manager on projects below that $150,000 threshold, and that we'll have a better quality product as a result of having this position on the contracts that we do award. I would say this, for years, we've been under threat from our insurance company, the carrier of our liability from year to year. We've been always within a stone's throw of every insurance company in the marketplace saying, we're not touching Fitchburg. Luckily, we're not there, and we've been able to walk back from that precipice. But we're still fairly close. And one of those things that they said, what would improve your standing with us? Know what would make your liability a little bit more palatable to us? This position. That satisfies one of their major concerns. When you satisfy an insurance company's concern, the cost of coverage goes down. So even if you refuse to accept all of the other points, this is one that the insurance company is saying, better get this position, we're going to feel a whole lot better. And the cost will go down or go up less in the future years as a result of having this position. That's an immediate cost savings that we wouldn't get if we don't have this position. I look and say, you can review this through 4 or 5 different lenses. All of them either save you money or make you money. Thank you. Councilor Boschman speaking for the second time.
Second time. I'll make it quick. I get a kick when I heard the council president talk to you about the insurance company. Lo and behold, I happen to be property management. I own a couple houses. And lo and behold, you know what the insurance companies do every year? They come around to my house and they point out the defects. That's what they do. And they give me an ultimatum. Fix them or don't. So why don't we do this? I know Travelers going to do it, because I know Travelers. They're going to come around to the buildings and they're going to say to the city of Fitchburg, you got to fix this, you got to fix this, and you got to fix that, and you got to fix the roof, and we want all these projects done. What are we going to say when we say we don't have them? And it does happen. They come to my house and they check my 4 buildings that I own. So when you tell me and you look at me, it doesn't happen. It happens. It happens right off there. They come every year to check my house for 3 things: safety and damages, because they don't want to pay. That's what they do. Now, the counselor said to me, it's not a duplicate. Well, it is a duplicate. It says he will be in charge of all the department personnel's plan, organize, and direct work assignments and manage the staff's performance. Right there in the back page, the same draft that I got that you got.
It's a draft.
The draft. That's number 2. Number 3, when we talk about saving money and there's no cost, there is a cost. We have a chance to save $90,000 a year. What's wrong with saving $90,000 and putting it on the bill? To knock down that bill faster so we can give more money to the library, to put a new place or renovate it, because we haven't done anything in over 30 years since George Walsh was alive. What? What's wrong with that? Or spend more money on our other buildings that they needed. Tell me, what's wrong with it? We came into cash, counselors, and we had free cash, and a lot of the money we got, we paid off some of that loan at that $2.5 million from free cash. Free cash, because I talked to Kelvin, not today, but before. I says, how come we're not paying it off? And you said we plan to. So I still say, and I maintain, we don't need the position. I'm sorry if I'm boring you and that. If you're gonna tell me this guy's gonna solve the problems, when the insurance company comes around and they look at your building and they're gonna look and they're gonna say, hey, we wanna see a new roof up there. Hey, you got a crack in the foundation, fix it, or we're not gonna cover you. We're gonna have to fix it, because I know they do it to me. And if they're doing it to the average homeowner, sure as heck they're gonna do it to places that got multi-million dollars, and there's a heck of a lot more damage that can occur, like the Crocker Elementary School. And I understand, and I said it already, I know about the fact of the matter that it was the coldest winter. I already said that. I knew that. And that's why the pipe broke, that pipe at Crocker Elementary. And the one at the Lonzo, it happened to be a fixture that hit the water sprinkler head that broke. So I'm not worried about that. He would have never picked that up. And I keep on repeating that. He's going to look after the big things, the big crack in the wall where there's a hole. He ain't going to look at the windows. He's going to look at the roof. You can tell if the roof is leaking. Look around it, and you'll see spots. How's he going to know? The roof could last another 5 years. If it's not, it could be 25 years old. You're not going to replace a roof, even though it's 25 years. If it's not leaking, you're not going to spend $250,000 or $1 million to fix a roof if it's not leaking. I'm not going to spend it on my house until they tell me. And I had a guy up there, and he told me. He said if he was a halfway decent carpenter or a roofer, he's going to say, I'm fixing your roof. You need a new roof, and I recommend you get the roof. The guy that comes in and fixes the plumbing, he says, you're going to have a leak over here. You should have that fixed. They tell you what needs to be done. These people that come in, these professionals tell you. So why do you need a guy to come and tell you what they're going to tell you at $90,000 plus? And he's going to need a secretary because he ain't going to have enough time. If you read the draft, he's going to want a secretary because he's going to be, like the word the other day, they're going to be overburdened. We can't get to everything. I'm overburdened and I need a secretary. And then he's going to need something else. So I'm not supporting it. Put my money somewhere else. Put the taxpayers' money back in the DPW and get us more men to get our roads and sidewalks repaired and other things.
Councilor Fleming.
Well, I won't be as dramatic, but I'd like to respond to something Councilor Boschman said. I don't understand why we would have to wait for the insurance company to come to Fitchburg to point out that this needs to be fixed, that has to be fixed, when we have somebody that we're trying to put in place that has those things already taken care of before it gets to that point. I work in the building industry. I see what these contractors go through. They have to be proactive. They have to make sure everything is up to code and done properly before the insurance or the inspector comes in to inspect. Otherwise, they're going to have to redo it. We're going to put somebody in place who's going to make sure those things are taken care of before it gets to the insurance point. So that's why we need a person like that. All big jobs have project managers. This is going to save us money on a project manager. That's all I have to say. If you're not maintaining your property, of course the insurance company is going to come and say, this has to be done, this has to be done. You should have had it done before it got to that point. Bingo, that's all.
Councilor Zarella speaking for the second time.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to echo that. Yes, first of all, I don't even know, and I don't think my colleagues know either, whether home insurance and municipal insurance operate on the same general principles. I suspect that they don't. But even assuming they do, the insurance company is going to come and tell you what has failed or is imminently about to fail. The goal is to make sure it never gets to that point, because when it has failed or is imminently about to fail, then we have to take out capital bonds to make a major repair. If we maintain it before it's about to fail, we spend a little money here, a little money there, and it doesn't get to the point where it needs a full replacement or a full repair for an additional several years beyond where it would have normally lasted. We want to be proactive, not retroactive, not retrospective. We don't want to look and say, oh yeah, that's broken. Yup, I can see that's busted. Well, sure, anyone can do that. We need someone who's going to say, you know what? That's not busted, and we can do this thing for $10,000 this year, give it another several years before it's busted. That's how we do it, especially when we have these capital lists that we know we don't have all the money for. We need someone who can say, yeah, you know, in an ideal world, would get a new roof next year. We can't afford a new roof next year. What can we do to extend the life of the current roof for an additional 5 years so that we can save up money to put on a new roof? We need someone who can do those things rather than having an ad hoc study committee or feasibility study every time there's a problem like that, because those cost money and they're inefficient. As far as oversight authority, if you look at the draft, at the part that my colleague was mentioning, it says that this person will be in charge of all facilities department personnel. The facilities department is being created in this new legislation. At the moment, it has no personnel. At the moment, it has a head, and that's it. The reason that that would be in the job description is in case this council decides somewhere down the road to create a larger department. But as of right now, the only reason we're creating a department instead of just a position is for budgetary purposes, so that we can have a separate section that says facilities as opposed to it being under building or DPW or something like that. This person is not going to be in charge of a department of actual people from the get-go. Then I'd also, speaking of committees and so forth, I'm on the Capital Improvements Committee by virtue of my chairing the City Property Committee. There are some people who, on that committee, who have good knowledge of construction projects and whatnot. But to the best of my knowledge, most of them, if not all of them, are not engineers. They're not experts in this particular kind of forward-looking maintenance. They're contractors. They're other kinds of engineers. It's not my industry. I can't say what all of them do. But my point is, they don't do this. They are not fully qualified, and especially not efficient, at looking at reports and proposals and saying, okay, based on all this technical data, here's what we need to do. That's not what they're there for. They're just there to look at a list of capital needs and say, okay, these ones look most urgent. These ones look like we can put them off a little longer. They're also all volunteers. I've been to one Capital Improvements Committee meeting in my going on 2.5, 3 years on the council. One meeting, and I haven't missed any. These people are not going to be willing to meet on a weekly basis to review what's going on in the city buildings and get ahead of things, or even on a monthly basis. They're not paid. They're volunteers. We can't just say, oh, well, it's their job. Let's have them in there twice a month and sit for hours to go over the latest reports from the various departments and whatnot. But if we're going to pay them, well, then we've got more employees and more costs, and why not pay this person? All committees, all commissions are either paid or volunteer, by definition. Loan service, that's already in the budget. It's every time we retire a loan and take out a new one, the service on that loan is already budgeted. That's not an additional cost. That's part of the capital bonding cycle. It's what we do. It's what every municipality does, unless they happen to be totally flush and have no additional capital needs. And it's true. Maybe we'll find out this person can't do everything we'd like them to. But right now we have no one doing anything. If this person does 25% of what we think they'll do, it will be a vast improvement over what we have now. And lastly, my original point that I was going to make prior to my colleagues speaking was simply that I have also spoken to constituents about this. There are And what I have discovered is that many of them have a lot of the same misconceptions that we've addressed tonight. I spoke to several who thought that this was just a person who was going to do walkthroughs of the buildings and identify, imminent maintenance needs, make a punch list. I spoke to another person who thought that this was just going to be someone sitting in an office receiving reports from the various, other maintenance people. I recontacted as many of these constituents as I could after the finance meeting, and everyone that I was able to speak to, once I explained what this position actually does and actually is, they have an entirely different perspective on it. Most of them are gung-ho about it now, and the ones who aren't are cautiously optimistic. So, I think we need to make sure that we're not going off of, we need to listen to our constituents, but we need to make sure that our constituents, before giving us their opinions on things, or when they give us our opinions on things, are getting the right information. Because a lot of the time, and it's not their fault, how are they supposed to know if all they see is the article in the Sentinel, which was sparse on detail? If they have the wrong impression of what a given proposal is, then how is their opinion supposed to accurately inform our decision? It's like the survey, an informal poll that they did in New York City a few years back, walking around the streets. Something like 50-some-odd% of the people they asked said they were opposed to women's suffrage because they didn't understand what the word suffrage meant and thought that it was, we're opposed to torturing women. Now, I'm not saying that people in Fitchburg are ignorant. Those people were just ignorant. But I'm saying that if you don't have the right information, your opinion is not going to pertain properly to the matter at hand. It's not that it's not valuable. It's that if you have an opinion on something that isn't actually what's in front of us, that's not helpful to anyone. So we need to go out there after tonight and go to our constituents and explain exactly what we voted on and why. I'm going to. I've got another list of people I'm going to be calling tomorrow. And I think when they understand, most of them have been in favor of it. A vast majority. I think there was one who was still opposed. So I'm going forward with this, and I think this is one of the better forward-looking plans that the city has come up with in my tenure.
Councilor Gina Talley.
Unsurprisingly, the people that are against this offered no realistic solutions to address the problem. Not surprising. Second, when matters come before us like this, some like to use boogeymen in the budget. Well, instead of spending $90,000 or $100,000, we could hire 2 DPW workers or 2 police officers. That's red meat for the residents, because that suggests to them that the council can hire officers, and we're saying, not that important. We're going to hire someone we don't need. We're going to hire somebody that's not going to do the work. That gets people angry. That misinforms them, and it's on purpose. So when we sit here and we talk about what could the $90,000 be put towards? Roads? Less than 1/10 of a mile. Sidewalks? Some sidewalks could cost that much. Again, what do we have problems in this city? We have problems with our school buildings, we have problems with our roads and our sidewalks. So why are those 3 things always talked about? Because it instills anger in people without informing them correctly. You mean you could spend $90,000 on sidewalks and roads and this and that without telling them what's that going to really give you? Nothing. So I get agitated when I hear that. Secondly, these numbers that were provided to the committee that were casted shade upon earlier, that it's not budget neutral or it's magically budget neutral, this came from the auditor of the city, a highly respected man in the field, who I might add has stewarded this city from bankruptcy. Now that we have an A+ bond rating, over $7 million in stabilization and $1.5 million in OPEB trust, and record free cash certifications. And we paid $1 million in the Long Joe roof, so we didn't have to borrow it. That was his idea. This isn't magic. This is an assessment of what this is going to cost. Is it going to be exact? No. That's why we have forecasting. We're not magicians. We're not genies. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. But to cast shade on this says you don't have any confidence in Mr. Brooks. That's my opinion. Okay? Number two, I get agitated, folks, and I repeat myself, because when we say, without equivocation, this is not duplicative, people still say it's duplicative. I don't understand it. You will not find a job description anywhere in the city that has a tenth of this. Not one. And we're already saying this person, whomever it is going to fail. Well, that's nice. Now, it was made a comment during the committee meeting and tonight that we're never going to cut a position. Not true. Happened 7 or 8 years ago. You recall it. Some of us who were there recall it. 4 years ago, where we didn't like the position, the job someone was doing, and we defunded it. Is it happen a lot? No. Is it rare? Yes. But it's an out. But if you don't want to defund the position, there's other things called an appointments process. If you don't like the job this person's doing, don't reappoint them, or don't approve the reappointment, or don't appoint the next person. That's not impossible. But again, I say that it's likely that's not going to happen because, as Councilor Zarella said, if this person covered 30% of this, it's more than what's taking place now. And we talk about boards and commissions. Are these people going to be on the front lines every day doing this kind of stuff? No. Are some of them experienced at this stuff? No. Are we going to rely on a commission of volunteers to do this line of work every single day of the week? No. So we're panning that it's going to cost 90 or 100 grand, but that's how much it's going to cost and some to do a feasibility study. I'll remind people, the Crocker Elementary School building, one building, $1 million. Not even in the realm of comparison. So again, context matters. And I feel bad because, unfortunately, folks, a majority of people are not going to watch this meeting. Majority of people aren't going to read the Sentinel. But they will read what's written on social media and what we say after this meeting. They're not going to get the real account. So I urge you all, however you can, post this meeting on your pages, the video, and when the job description is released, I'm going to do all I can to highlight it. Because I know after tonight, this is going to get distorted. Because people are upset about the condition of our school buildings, our roads, and our sidewalks, without any concept of what those things cost. Not a single concept. So, I'll end with this. I've been here since 2008. When the city was on the brink of bankruptcy, that was my first year in office, when our junk bond status was real. Since 2008, we've thrown $20 million into our school buildings. $20 million. Okay? What is 90 grand going to do for the school department? What's it going to do for the library when they need 39 million? What's 90 grand going to do for the school department when they need 200 million? Again, red meat to the residents. Okay? Find a subject that upsets them and make them think that we've got all this money sitting around and we don't do anything with it that we should. Free cash. 5 years, we've realized $20 million in free cash. Can anyone guess what the department was that got the most free cash out of any department in the city for for building needs? The schools. Over 27% of the free cash in 5 years went to the school department. What's the next one? DPW. We have bought, I can't even count how much new equipment for that department. A new salt shed. We're fixing the roof on their administrative building. I hear OPEB and pension, and then we hear, well, let's hire a couple of DPW workers. I'm getting mixed signals here. So we have spent the majority of our available funds on DPW and schools. That is a fact that people don't want to recognize because it refutes the narrative that we go like this. And that's why I get angry. That's why I get passionate, because it's not true. Thank you.
Councilor Green,
Motion.
speaking for the second time.
I'd like to make a motion to,
We have a motion and seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those in opposition? 2 in opposition, Councilors Scalia and Boishman. Motion carries 9-2. Councilors, we also have a public hearing coming up. At this point, I'm going to ask us to take a 3 minutes recess and reconvene at 9:46.
Oh, hip.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, it's just a
Councilors, we all set?
Yes.
All right, we're gonna resuming the meeting. Next up, we have the planning board meeting of February 11th, 2020. They took up the following matters: 02920.
Move 02920 be sent to a public hearing on April 7th.
Second.
Motion and second to send 02920 to a public hearing. I'm sorry, and to legislative affairs and to a public hearing on April 7th. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. 04520, Councilors Michael Kushmarek and Amy Green and residents Joseph and Linda Byrne to name the junction of Main Street and North Street, Jerry Martell Square, as a remembrance of a man who spent 50 years in a corner as Mr. Music and Mr. Auto Professional. He represents the epitome of a businessman and an entrepreneur who lived his life on this corner. The motion was that it be granted. Motion and second to approve 04520. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. Public Works Committee, Councilor Fleming.
Yes, we met on February 25th and took up, I believe it was 4 orders. 046-20, which I believe Councilor Zarella already alluded to. Councilors Marisa Fleming and Marcus Di Natale to declare Ethia Street a public way. That was going to be held. Multiple citizens to repair Mataggart's Dam to refill pond and restore wildlife population. That's 209-18. That was given leave to withdraw. Petition 12619, Councilor Joel Caddy to correct water problems at 15 Thurston Place. That was held. And 25219, Councilor Paul Boschman, that Boulder Drive from Putnam Street to be closed to traffic for pedestrian use only. That was given leave to withdraw.
Motion to approve.
Motion to amend, motion to approve, except for number 20918.
Second.
20918. Okay. I have a motion and second to approve the Public Works Committee report excluding 20918. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries.
Move to accept 20918.
Second.
I have a motion and second.
Motion to read papers.
Granted, Councilor Kuchar.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was contacted by a resident of Ward 5, 859 Ringe Road in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, a Mr. Michael Hurley. He sent me a letter to read publicly, dated March 2nd, 2020. On April 13th, 2018, McTaggart's pond was drained. The decision to drain the pond was made after it failed the dam safety test. It's been reported that the leakage in the gatehouse has worsened since the last semi-annual inspection. McTaggart Pond and the surrounding 15-acre Moran Playground is located 2 miles from the center of Fitchburg. McTaggart's Pond and Moran Playground serves as a passive park area for the city of Fitchburg. The pond serves as home for a wide variety of wildlife. Among these are several types of fish: beaver, muskrat, ducks, blue heron, etc. According to the report from hooksandbullets.com posted in the Mass Fish and Game website, at McTaggart's Pond, fishermen would find a variety of fish, including brown trout, perch, bream, bluegill, and rainbow trout. There's a similar pond in Leominster, which is maintained by the Recreations Department and DPW. Barrett's Pond has an 8.9 acres of hiking trails with seasonally stocked trout for fishing. You can also fish for many species of fish from the banks of Lake Whalum in Lunenburg. The lower area of Moran Field has a trail system that is complemented by the trout-filled Phillips Brook that fills the pond. The trail running through the middle of the expansive area is overgrown, but could easily be opened to make a loop. There's a beautiful stone bridge in the middle of this trail that you can easily ride a bike over. Before we make this area a brook without a pond, let's reflect on what this will mean. We have breached the dam at Salma Park and Greens Pond recently. No more herons, no more ducks will be seen there. Should the residents of Fitchburg have to go to our sister city in order to fish in a public park? This passive park could complement the city's bike trails. Let's have a destination from Main Street to commute with nature and maybe enjoy a tranquil picnic lunch. Have we exhausted all other options, or are we just saying it's a done deal? Let's consider our wildlife. The citizens of Fitchburg deserve a passive park with a pond to show our children what this important ecosystem is.
Has the city even investigated grants to aid in the saving of this gem? Should we add Moran's Playground to the list of abandoned or incomplete projects in West Fitchburg, like the many paper mills, treatment plants, and soccer fields? Let's not abandon the location that pays homage to Pat Moran, one of the Fitchburg finest baseball players and major league coaches. The ripple effect of totally eliminating this pond can never be reversed. And to be quite honest with you, I agree with Mr. Hurley. I've been approached by people of Ward 3 angry at the motion to give leave to withdraw the petition to refill the pond and to repair McTaggart's Dam. So, but Mr. Hurley's letter shows that this isn't just going to affect Ward 3. This also will affect all of the city of Fitchburg. This is a natural green space that we should really look into considering keeping. You know, a lot of people, there's people that live around this pond that properties values, they may drop because now they're no longer a waterfront property. And I know people around are saying, okay, well, that's fine for them. But the problem is here is it devalues a good portion of our ward in West Fitchburg. In addition, Mr. Hurley talks about the wildlife. The eagles that have been recently spotted in and around Fitchburg, well, guess what? They were up there. So now instead of picking a fish out of the pond, they're picking up a small dog out of somebody's yard. You know, we have to preserve some of the nature that we have in our city. And by demolishing this dam, the price tag is going to be about $2 million to completely demolish this dam. $3 million to rebuild it. If we're going to be spending the $2 million, I think we should at least consider other options. You know, during the Public Works Committee, hydroelectric power was discussed. People liked the idea, but it was dismissed. But yet, using Councilor Green's earlier statement of how we're going to be trucking in other people's crap in order to create power, we have an ability here to at least look to see if it's feasible to try to look into hydroelectric. The city has over 20 dams that they complain about having to maintain. Well, let's use those areas to see maybe if we can utilize them to benefit the city. Now, I agree with Councilor Di Natale that if a project isn't going to make the city money, it's not worth it. But can we at least look into it? Thank you.
Councilors, I keep with my pledge before when I make a mistake. So 3.6, when we have a motion on the table, is only we're restricted to what types of motions can be used. I erred in allowing this, so I just want to state. So typically, once there's a motion and second, there's only several. I'd encourage you to take a look at 3.6. There's only so many. This was my error, so Councilor Kuchar, doesn't reflect you. That said, also, I guess just moving forward, because I could see a slippery slope here for reading of papers. If I understand it, is at my discretion moving forward? Am I correct?
It can be done either by unanimous consent or by formal motion, which would require a second, and I don't know if it's debatable, but it's it would require a second and a majority.
So I'll make this point, and we can chat about that after the meeting. But I would just ask if we receive a communication and it has had an opportunity to be read at the committee, I would just ask that we try to do that because, you know, particularly for those of you new counselors, I mean, we could end up, I mean, I get 5, 10, 15 emails prior to any meeting. We could start to go down that line of we're reading every email into the record. So that's my request at this point. I'll be conversing with Councilor Zarella as to the best how to proceed moving forward. So at this point, it's just a request, not a mandate. But I just ask that you bring that into consideration of whether or not there's an opportunity to read it or forward it to the committee meeting, to enter it into the records and share it with the council in advance, or to have that individual come during public comment. That said, I have a number of speakers wishing to speak on the motion and second on the floor, the first being Councilor Zarella.
So, I'd just like to address the financial feasibility piece of things. As I understand it, there is grant funding available to remove the dam. There is not presently grant funding available to repair the dam, and so it's actually more of a $3 million difference than a $1 million difference. And furthermore, maintaining the dam would be, as I recall, approximately $600,000 to $700,000 per year.
7,000.
7,000?
7,000.
Okay, 7,000. I apologize. Obviously, I got that a little bit off. Little bit.
Probably
But so that's a lot lower. But so let's focus on the 1 million, on the 3 versus 2 million. Then it's more like 3 million versus some amount relatively low, possibly zero, not 2 million, depending on how much grant funding we get. I am very sympathetic to the idea of wanting to preserve natural spaces for citizens' use, but we have other spaces, and this is not one that we can afford to maintain at the moment. The yearly maintenance is, yes, a much lower number than the one that I had in my head for some reason. But there are going to be future instances where larger repairs are needed, and we're already dealing with budget issues. I mean, we're doing very well with them comparatively, but we don't have money to throw around. I am interested in the proposal for the possibility of hydroelectric power, but insofar as we need to make a decision on this particular dam in a relatively expeditious fashion because it's currently unsafe, I think we don't have time to investigate the hydroelectric option on this particular one. Down the road, I don't know, but it would be interesting. So I'm going to support the decision of the committee.
Councilor Di Natale.
I support the committee's recommendation for the simple fact that this dam does not serve any ecological purpose, has no ecological benefits. It was created to supply power to a nearby plant that no longer is in existence, nor was it ever done so. The state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, is very receptive and openly advocating for the removal of dams like this that serve no purpose, which is why if we remove it, they will likely pay for it. If we do not remove it, they won't pay for it. It's as simple as that. So the Commonwealth supports removal of these types of dams, and we just got over a discussion about how the sky's going to fall if we spend $90,000, and yet this is $3.5 million to repair it with no state funding. So to those that want this to stay as is, where's the $3.5 million coming from? And don't say City Hall, don't say library, because that would assume that if we didn't do those things, it'd go to dam repairs. We all know that's not the alternative. Again, red meat. I'm just anticipating it. So if you read the analysis, it says quite clearly that the reason for removal is preferable because it improves public safety. We can get grant funding for the removal of the dam. It provides improvement in ecological value by removing the heat source from the brook. And the dam removal would look favorably upon by permitting agencies, and it eliminates the city's liability. So when you look at the costs of repairing it versus not, and what it was intended to do when it was created, to me, it was always a no-brainer for me that we cannot repair this dam. We have other dams in the city. It's not a matter of dealing with our other dams. Our other dams in the city that we do have to attend to serve a purpose and are important from the Commonwealth's perspective and our own perspective, there are some dams like this that are not, they don't have any purpose other than because we're not using it, there's some recreational use out of it. Well, it's also not wrong to have it return to its natural habitat. You know, the wildlife will come back, the growth will occur. So, to me, this is, from a financial standpoint, beyond anything else, this is a no-brainer, but also from an ecological standpoint. So, that's why I support it. Thank you.
Counselor Squalia.
Yes, the one thing that I would, about McTaggart's Dam that I really like is that it's a kind of our one recreational pond in the city. It's our one potential. And when we remove this dam, it's gone forever. However, when you look at the cost, over $3 million to repair the dam, and then the ongoing maintenance and the future costs of repairing it again, compared to the likely potential that we'll get grants to restore, not only remove the dam, but restore it back to its natural habitat that is ecologically preferred by any ecological themed organization or expert or engineer. Dam removal is the golden standard compared to repairing of dams. So, but I would like to see if we were flush with cash, I would love to see us maintain that dam and us utilize that pond for recreational purposes. But ever since we've even closed the dam, or long before that, we haven't been utilizing this pond. We have no organization that wants to, that is proposing to use the pond. We have no organization that's proposing to clean up the trails behind it and doing things. We have suggestions that the city should do it. And while I would love that to happen, it doesn't look like the city can't afford it on its own, and it doesn't look like we have any community organizations that are stepping up. So I will be voting in favor of the committee's recommendation.
Councilor Van Housinga.
First of all, I think it's important to understand that the use of the dam for hydroelectric power is not feasible. It's been tried. The previous owner of the dam bought the dam and the pond with that intent. Didn't work. That's why they gave up the liability and let the city take it in tax title. I think it was a mistake for the city to take it. It's a lot of liability to assume. And I think it's also important to consider, like Councilor Squalia said, that there are no public facilities that utilize this pond. There's no public beach. There's no public boat ramp. There's no docks. It primarily benefits the residents who abut the pond. And I'm sympathetic to their concerns. It's a nice amenity, and it's disappointing to see it go away for them. And I am sympathetic to that. But $3.4 million is a lot of money to spend to primarily benefit a handful of houses there. I'm sorry about the situation, but we just do not have the money to spend on this.
Councilor Schultz.
He just covered what I was going to cover at the committee meeting. We were told about the company that had it and explored the hydroelectric aspect and gave it back to the city. And hopefully here on in we won't take any of these dams back.
Councilor Fleming.
You addressed what I was going to address, so we're good.
I have a motion and second to accept the committee's recommendation. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? One in opposition. Councilor Kuchar. The motion carries 10-1. Water Wastewater Commission 00520 ordered that whereas on March 13th, 1995, the city of Fitchburg entered into an agreement with the town of Westminster whereby the city agreed to accept and treat wastewater from the town as outlined in the enclosed order, and the recommendation was that that be adopted.
Make a motion, we accept 005.
Second.
I have a motion and second to accept 005. Speaking on the motion, Councilor Zarella.
I would suggest, just as a procedural matter, that since we already approved this same action.
This would be accepting the
This would be
report.
accepting the report
Yes.
as a document.
So I have a motion and second to accept 00520 as a report from the Wastewater Commission. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. To our guests who have been waiting for a long time. 4720, Tom Skorowski, Executive Director of Planning and Community Development, and IVJ Group LLC to amend the Housing Development Incentive Program, HDIP, plan and map to include additional parcels, most specifically the Ivor Johnson Mills. The letter explains the process further, as does the updated Plans and maps, zoning changes are available to view in the city clerk's office. I now declare the hearing open. Mr. Skrowski, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hearing this public hearing tonight. I'm joined by Norm Garapi, as well as Rich Darche, two of the three members of the IVJ group that are redeveloping the Aver Johnson Mill buildings. They have been on this for about 2 years, doing a lot of pre-development work, brownfield remediation work, getting together historic tax credits. They've exercised a great deal of patience in this process, and I think that should be exhibited by the fact that they're pretty much the only non-city staff here today. That should be a manifestation of that patience. But they've been working diligently along with Aldo Marzafaro, who's the third member of the Aver Johnson group. One of the key components that they need to make this project work is the HDIP tax credit. HDIP stands for Housing Development Incentive Program. It's a program we've had in place since 2013. It was primarily in the Student Housing Overlay District. For all intents and purposes, that's from Academy Street to Highland Street. And that district, it's created by a state program, 40V, that looks to encourage market rate housing in gateway cities. Any city that has a HDIP district is eligible for state tax credits for market rate housing projects. On the one hand, up to $2 million or 25% of the rehab cost of a project. On the other hand, it also makes those projects eligible for a local tax increment exemption, what a lot of folks think of as a TIF, 5 to 20 years for 10 to 100% of the value created on a project. So currently, the district ends at about Academy Street. It doesn't extend to the Aver Johnson Mill, and that's what this amendment is really seeking to do. It's not changing anything substantially from our current HDIP district, except for the geography. It just bumps it out a bit to encompass both the Aver Johnson Mill buildings as well as the Broad Street mills in addition to that. That's really the gist of it. The development in question that we're extending the district for, the Aver Johnson Mills, it will be 3 buildings that will be redeveloped into 70 units of mixed use, primarily housing with a small commercial component. And with that, I'll take questions.
Councilor Di Natale.
I just want to make a clarifying point that the Economic Development Committee already voted favorably for this extension.
Unanimously?
Unanimous, and I believe the council adopted that recommendation of the report, which had that recommendation in it. So I just wanted to make that primer before we start here, that we've already approved this extension, but this is part of this whole.
It's a precondition to getting the amendment approved by DHCD. You need to have this publicly noticed, and we need to show them proof of the notice, et cetera.
So this is like a formality then?
Some would call it that.
Yep, okay.
Councilor Squalia.
For the public's edification, this proposal doesn't include specifically a tax break. It just includes the opportunity to negotiate tax breaks. Is that correct?
Correct. It would still need to be agreed upon by the council, negotiated with the mayor's office. This just makes that project eligible for that incentive.
Thank you.
Councilor Boishman.
So I want to make sure I understand that. So if these young men come over and they say, we want a TIF or a tax break, will it go back to the original cost of the building, or will it go as it progresses? If they spend $20 million, we have to wait 10 years or 20 years to get that?
It's a good question. So tax increment exemption, so it exempts the increment of value created on a project. Say the project's valued at $100 today, and they put $1 million in, and then it's worth $1,100,000. We could exempt that increment created, that $1 million from basically from 5 to 20 years for a value of 10 to 100% of that value. So we could say for 20 years we're going to exempt 100% of that increment, and the property owner wouldn't be taxed on that extra $1 million for a period of 20 years. Now, gentlemen, I hope you didn't hear that, because that's a pretty aggressive tax agreement, but that would be, the largest extent that could be negotiated.
Now, when I was reading some of the plans, now, does he have enough parking? Will he have enough parking for the,
Councilor, that's not before us.
Oh,
It's really just to make it so we include the parcels. That'll all have an opportunity to go through the proper channels when we get to that point.
all right, I just want to make sure. And my other question, Why doesn't this fall underneath smart growth?
It does. Now, the two are a bit incompatible. Well, I guess on the one hand, if they did the smart growth 40R district, there's an affordability component attached to it where, you know, at least 20% of the project would need to be affordable. And again, the other element of, I guess, with this project, it's a tool that is specifically designed for market rate housing projects. So they're sort of in opposition in that respect. They could certainly look at pursuing the smart growth zoning, but then they would need to have 20% of the project be affordable, and DHCD wouldn't allow a developer to pair affordable housing state benefits with a market rate housing state benefit. Sort of
Right.
incompatible.
Councilor Van Hazinga.
One thing that our city needs is new development of high-quality market rate housing. We have a large inventory of subsidized and income-restricted housing. We have a lot of housing that isn't restricted but has similar rents to the restricted properties. What we need is market rate, high-quality housing, and this is a tool to make that happen. Market rate development is very difficult in this area because the rents that you get in Boston, the immediate suburbs, are astronomically higher than here. But the cost to build a building is not much different when you exclude the land. The steel you put in a building costs the same if you put it in Fitchburg as you do in Cambridge. There's no difference. The same crews work on buildings in Fitchburg and Cambridge. So therefore, there's a gap that has to get met up to make these projects financially feasible. This is one tool we can use to help encourage these projects, to make them feasible, to make them happen. We have an existing district covering the downtown area. No projects have used it yet, but there has been inquiries, and there are some possibilities for some projects that have been proposed to use this program in the existing district. There's also great opportunities to encourage future development in the proposed expansion. This includes the Ivor Johnson Mills, it includes other mills in the Ivor Johnson area, and includes the properties on Broad Street. Some of them are being used, some of them may not be converted today, maybe not tomorrow, but in the future, that's a possibility. We should keep that open. So this allows developers to fill that gap and make these more financially possible. It makes it more likely, and it makes it more likely that we're going to fill some empty buildings and get some quality housing in the city.
Councilor Zarella.
I second basically what my colleagues have said, and I am in favor of this proposal. I would like to advance to a motion, but I cannot do so until we have called for public comment, so I would request that we do that at this time.
That is correct. I have no remaining folks on the list, so I will ask if there was anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of the petition. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition to the petition? If all have been heard, I declare the hearing closed. The matter is before the council.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve 04720. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying the duration, and my apologies for the long.
Thank you very much. And you hit it right on the mark about the financial aspect of this project here when you look at the rents in Fitchburg versus Boston and the cost of the construction. So, and Tom's been very helpful to work this through the committee, so thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have orders finance, which stand referred 059 through 06120 to finance. We now have ordinances 043 through 05620.
Motion they be sent to their third and final reading, enrolled, ordained, and advertised.
A motion and second to send 043 up to and including 05620 to their third final reading, enrolled, ordained, and advertised. Speaking on the motion, Councilor Van Hazinga.
In regards to 6320, as a former member of the planning board.
Councilor, that's the one we haven't.
I'm sorry, I
no
thought it was
problem.
included.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. You must recuse yourself for this matter. Is that what you're asking? Okay.
To approve 06320.
060. I have a motion and second to send 06320 to its first reading. Speaking on the motion, Councilor Van Hazinga.
I'd like to say, as a former member of the planning board, I am always in awe of the amount of work that our chair put into that position, the amount of homework she did outside of meetings, her preparedness, and her ability to manage the meetings effectively. I've always been amazed that it's not a compensated position, and I think this is a very small amount, but it shows that it's something. And I think she absolutely earns it, and anyone in that position will earn it. And I urge you to support this.
Well stated, Counselor. It's, the dollar figure doesn't go far, but hopefully it's a symbolic gesture of our gratitude as a very thankful city for the work that goes in from that position. Speaking on the motion, Counselor Zarella.
I'd just like to second that as a current member of the zoning board. I know both boards operate along pretty similar lines, including the same schedule, actually. And I assume it's much the same schedule in terms of number of hours put in per meeting as well. There's no way this comes close to compensating the amount of work that the chairs actually do, but it's a good recognition, and I'm happy to see it.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. 06420.
Be sent to a public hearing for March 17th.
Motion and second to send 06420 to a public hearing on March 17th, 2020. Speaking on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. And then just one standing item in legislative affairs, 02820, and requesting additional.
Yes, it's been scheduled for March 17th.
Move to re-refer to.
Unless there's any objection, it'll stand referred back to legislative affairs. All right, seeing none. Quick announcements. Saturday, March 7th from 5 to 10 p.m., the Worcester County Firefighters Emerald Society 11th Annual Irish Festival at the Fitchburg Senior Center. Adults $12 in advance, $15 at the door. Children $5 in advance, $8 at the door. Wednesday, March 11th from 4 to 7 p.m., St. Patrick's Day dinner at Fitchburg Senior Center. Music by Vinnie Prendergast and the Sons of Blarney. Tickets are $8, no takeout. Thursday, March 12th at 6 p.m., Fitchburg Public School Future Chef event at Fitchburg High. Students make their recipes and the mayor is the judge. Saturday, March 14th from 6 to 9 p.m., Steampunk Masquerade at Fitchburg Art Museum. For more information, contact the Art Museum, 978-345-4207. And then we'd like to extend a very special thank you to all of our poll workers, the DPW workers, police, and the city clerk staff that worked the recent presidential primary. They did an exceptional job facilitating this election. Truly exceptional. Nothing like what happened in Iowa. So our thanks as a grateful nation go out to you and your staff. And we're especially grateful to the Registry of Deeds personnel, Adam Costa and Kenny Milton, who enabled a week of early voting at their location. A lot of logistical work that goes in there, and so we'd like to thank them as well. Thank you to everyone for the election, and thank you to those who went out and voted. Announcement, Councilor Squalia.
Sunday, March 8th, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. is maple season at Hollis Hills Farm. There's going to be breakfast and music. And Sunday, March 8th, from 3 to 5 p.m. is the Radius Ensemble Concert at the Fitchburg Art Museum. On Monday, March 9th, there is no school in Fitchburg Public Schools. On Saturday, March 14th, there is a community forum about the Student Opportunity Act at Fitchburg High School from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And on Saturday, March 14th, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at McKay's Wallace Theater is a free play called We Did It For You, Women's Journey Through History. Thank you.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, councilors.